Maybe all be seated. Well, we'll start with continue with the defense calling their next witness. May you proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. I call Dr. Stephen Cook.
Right there's fine.
Under penalties of perjury, do you solemnly, sincerely, and truly declare and affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this matter shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Good morning, Dr. Cook. Could you
Good morning.
state your name and spell it for the record, please?
Stephen with a V. We couldn't afford a PH. Dean Cook, C-O-O-K.
And where are you from and what do you do?
I live in Chippewa Falls, Wisconsin. I'm a native Wisconsinite. Grew up in Green Bay. I went to Northwestern Medical School, graduated in 1976. I did 5 years of family medicine, and then I have done 33 years of emergency medicine, and am now just recently finished with that and doing some nursing home work. So,
Was all of your practice in Wisconsin?
yes.
And where'd you practice in Wisconsin?
In Chippewa Falls and Eau Claire, and a few moonlighting jobs, Racine and that area for a few shifts here and there, but most all of it was in Eau Claire and Chippewa Falls.
And in Eau Claire and Chippewa Falls, were you associated with a hospital there?
Yes, I was associated with two hospitals, mostly Sacred Heart Hospital and St. Joseph's Hospital.
Are you board certified in emergency medicine?
Yes, since 1989.
So I want to ask you a little bit about emergency medicine. What is the discipline of emergency medicine? If you could tell the jury.
It has evolved immensely from the time I started. It has become its own specialty. That's a lot of things have become their own specialties, but if you look at what medicine does, and it's evolving even yet as we speak, but when I first started, there wasn't a specialty effectively yet, and a lot of the physicians in town didn't entirely trust us, so they would still come in and see a number of their patients. Since that time, what has happened is everybody wants us to take care of every problem that we can before they come in to be seen. So we get all the traumas, we get all the injuries of any kind, we get all the heart attacks, we get all the strokes, we get all those things initially, do whatever needs to be done in those first few minutes to first couple hours to take care of things, get them stabilized, then they get admitted to the hospital, and that's usually when the other physicians will take over on them. So it is a stabilizing, but there is a lot. The interesting part about it is there are no 2 days that are ever the same, and you don't know what you're going to get in the next 5 minutes. It can be incredibly chaotic, and it can be slow for a few hours when you think it would be busy. Nobody comes in or just a cough or a cold. Or you can have, I've had one time where I've had 3 rooms with simultaneous codes, and you have to run from room to room, do a shock, do a shock, do a shock, run back while they're doing CPR, which you can't imagine how crazy it can be at times, but it varies to whatever you get that day, and no 2 days are the same.
In the course of your 33 years in emergency medicine, have you seen victims of serious automobile accidents?
Yes. We were what was called the trauma center. They've subsequently come up with designations, but we did almost all the trauma in that region for 20 plus years. So I've seen easily over 100 car accidents.
How about cases of domestic violence?
Yes, certainly have seen many of those, and rapes and sexual assaults as well.
And in those types of cases, do you often see indications from your examination of people of, for example, strangulation?
Yes, you will see strangulation. You will see pathognomonic marks, which are marks that For example, you have a slap mark to the hand or a hit to the hand or a press someplace where you can actually see the outline of fingers, and you can go, well, this was obviously caused by a hand. So that's called pathognomonic, when the type of thing you're seeing is diagnostic of what caused it. So you see those type of injuries, yes.
I'm going to ask you to do the court reporter a favor and spell pathognomonic for me.
P-A-T-H-O-G-N-O-M-I-C. Mnemonic. It might be EU. That's a good one. There's a lot of medical words that are interesting to spell when you start trying to do it.
In the course of seeing victims of domestic violence or sexual assault, have you become acquainted with the pathognomonic marks of fingernail scratchings and defensive wounds?
Yes, defensive wounds, absolutely. And fingernail scratches and other type of hair pulling, things that you can see that are types of domestic abuse signs, yes, you will see all of those in the course of if you work ER.
In the course of your career in emergency medicine, have you seen industrial accidents?
Yes, many.
Have you seen patients who have suffered blows to the head?
Yes, many.
On approximately how many occasions?
Blows to the heads, 400. I mean, from various things, but there's a lot of people that come in with head injuries. And by blows to the head, it can be not only something hitting people, but also falls into things when people will trip, stumble, slide, slip, have something happen where they will hit irregular objects. Your head doesn't care if the object came to it or if you came to the object. It's still an injury that occurs to the head, and the injuries can have similarities to it, if that makes sense.
Have you had the occasion to treat homicide victims before they pass away?
Yes, I've had probably 3 over the years that died within a short number of hours from the time they came to ER. We were doing resuscitative work on them.
And have you had occasion to examine people who have suffered injuries as a result of an object perforating a windshield?
I actually have. I've had 3 cases of those over the years. One was instantly fatal, and one had permanent disability, and the other one did okay in the long run. So.
I have placed in front of you 2 exhibits, 263, 264. Let me ask you about 264 first.
Okay.
What is exhibit 264?
It is basically my CV or my summary of my training and some of my work while I kept my CV up.
And is this up to date?
Well, I haven't entered anything on it for a decade and a half, so when it says to present, I retired from ER, full-time ER work in summer of 2015. So that would not be on there. But otherwise, it's accurate up to the point. It's accurate up to that point.
I move exhibit 164 into evidence,
264,
or 264.
any objection?
No objection.
Be received.
Dr. Cook, there's just a couple of things on your CV I want to ask you about. It says you recorded an album.
Yes, I did. A friend of mine and I at school were the class entertainment, and we wrote parody songs about the school, and we made an album of that.
And the other one I can't let go is it says you were a personal physician for Elvis in 1977.
I can't actually back that one up. That was just added to the CV to give it some interest. Although I did meet Richard Nixon one time, so that was about the biggest celebrity I ran into while at the hospital.
Let me ask you about exhibit 264. What is Exhibit 264?
Well, that's the CV 263.
Or 263, I'm sorry.
263 is what I had written to you when I reviewed all the information, and you had requested I summarize what I had thought of reviewing, and you have listed all the sources of information from this case. So I looked at all those and then summarized what I thought of that information.
So this is your report or summary of your investigation into the matter.
Correct.
I would move Exhibit 263 into evidence.
Any objection?
No objection.
You received?
Now, Exhibit 263 lists sources of information with which you were provided. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Were you provided with the Dane County Medical Examiner's autopsy report and photos?
Yes, I was.
And with Barbara Kendhammer's medical records?
Yes, of the hospital, yes.
Were you provided with a transcript of Dr. McCubbin's testimony in a prior hearing in this matter?
Yes, I was.
Were you provided with Officer Yaley's interview with Todd Kendhammer?
Yes, I was.
Were you provided with a transcript of that interview as well?
That is correct.
And were you provided with a transcript of the interview of Todd Kendhammer at the La Crosse County Sheriff's Office?
That is correct.
Were you provided with Mark Meshlum's report on glass?
Yes, I was.
Were you provided with scenes of photographs of the accident scene?
Yes.
Were you provided with photographs of the pipe in question?
Yes, I was.
Were you provided with photographs of Todd Kendhammer's injuries?
Yes.
Are these the types of facts and data on which a physician in your position, and specifically a trauma or emergency medicine physician, would normally rely in order to reach conclusions in a matter?
Yes.
Having had the opportunity to review all of these materials, we have heard testimony from Dr. McCubbin that all of Mrs. Kendhammer's injuries cannot be explained by a blow from a pipe coming through the windshield of an automobile. Are you familiar with that opinion?
I'm familiar with that. That was her summary in her statement.
And do you agree with that?
I totally do.
In this case, did you reach a conclusion to a reasonable degree of medical certainty about the cause of Barbara Kendhammer's injuries?
Yes, I did.
Can you tell the jury what that opinion is?
I think the injuries here are entirely consistent with the accident as was described by Mr. Kendhammer. And
Will you explain to the jury why?
I will explain why I think and what I think happened in this. Now, first of all, several things about car accidents. One, the time frame is incredibly compressed. This is all, the amount of, the serious injuries that she sustained in this all happened within 2 to 3 seconds. This is an incredibly rapid process. If you see what happens, you've seen slow-mo videos of crash dummies and stuff to see how it is, but even in your own vehicles, the reaction time you have on things happening is a very short period of time. Pipe's coming towards the windshield. You pick it up somewhere because motion, your brain has wonderful visual receptors where you see something, and if it changes an emotion pattern, it sets off a bit of a warning to you. All of us driving have probably at least had a pebble hit the windshield or something that was a rock. Most of us have had it where we've seen it just a fragment of a second before it hit the windshield, tiny ones, or sometimes you just heard it and reacted a little bit. I have had the displeasure of having a rock about the size of a baseball come from behind a truck and hit right about where I would have been positioned in terms of driving when I was driving with my family one time and on a trip in Wyoming. You could see it, I could see it coming in, but I'll tell you, you didn't pick that up until just before it comes and hits, because everything's moving at high speed. Your instantaneous reaction to that is to try and get out of the way of that or to block it. You do one of the two things, and most people, the normal reaction is to duck. You're going to see that, and I ducked. When this happened, I was like this. My kids all laughed. They saw it hit. It put a hole about this big in the windshield, but it didn't come through. So glass splattered a little bit. But I ducked. I actually hit the steering wheel with my forehead. I'm wearing a seatbelt, because if you don't brake, your seatbelt doesn't just stop you right away from moving forward. That was my reaction to it. If you see something like this coming at you, your natural reaction is to try and duck. The other thing you do is you tense. Your body is very tense when this happens. If you see a flight or danger, everything is tense acutely. This is why in a lot of accidents in the past, when people were drunk driving, that was the person who didn't seem to get hurt. And you've certainly seen that in the news and other stuff, because they're relaxed. They're not in a position where everything is tense, so some of the absorption of the energy happens naturally when people are relaxed. But you see something coming at the windshield. Now, he tries to hit the windshield. The windshield has a dent going outward, so he obviously had to have hit the windshield to make a dent go outward. That's a reaction. You're trying to do something. What's going to happen with your left hand when that occurs? You ever reached across to just get something in the car? You're going to pull the wheel. So you're going to have a little of this action happening in the car when this happens. It's going to go side to side and sway a little bit. That's his side of the car. Her side, she sees this coming. She ducks. That's the only thing she can really effectively do is try and duck. Now she's holding a large coffee mug.
Can I stop you right there? Show you what's been marked as Exhibit 57. Is this the mug?
Yes,
You saw?
that's the I saw a picture of it. I didn't see the mug before, but yes. A large coffee mug, a rigid coffee mug. She's holding this, maybe had just taken a sip of coffee, now sees this, she goes to duck, gets as low as she can, forward, pipe comes in. First blow, the long laceration is the pipe. Now the pipe, when Hollywood puts a pipe through a windshield, it goes right through you, okay? Pins you to the seat. Depends if it's Quentin Tarantino, then it goes to your forehead, but Hollywood has the pipe always go through you. Stuff comes in, it moves. In this case, it doesn't have to go through you to do damage to you. It comes in right next to her, bam, she's right next to her, she's going in, she's heading into it, side of the pipe. That's the blow that created the bleed in the brain and knocked her unconscious right at that moment.
Doctor,
Wham.
may I interrupt you, fellows?
Yes.
May I have the pomo turned down, please?
It takes a while to warm up. The projector's warming up. There you go. Comes on slowly.
The jury has seen this photograph before.
That's the bigger of the two. And this is not this is a fairly typical thing you see in, your scalp has 7 layers from the top of your skin down to the bone. And some of them are fascial layers, and that's what you're seeing underneath. But when you crush, when you smash down on something, if you slice through it, if you have something sharp, it's a clean cut, and you will just see scalp and both edges. When you smash down, it has to separate the skin, so it tears it apart, and the tears are often irregular, like you're seeing there. You will have little bands that will connect. It sometimes almost looks stellate, like you can have parallel cuts even sometimes with them, depending on how it hit. But it will have that kind of almost a shredded sort of a look, because it tears it apart rather than cuts it. It's from an impact force. So this blow smacked on the head. Now she's tense, she's tightened up, she's going forward as hard as she can to try and avoid this. This pipe whacks her, okay? Natural reaction of a blow anywhere here is gonna knock you down. It's gonna knock her down right into this, if this is sitting on her lap. This has busted off right in here. This, if you've gotten it right here on your neck coming up, in a hard blow that you're unconscious have been snapped down to it, can now break your hyoid bone, create all these injuries on the anterior neck and crush the anterior airway here. And in addition, what does that do? Now as you've done that, you've hyperextended the neck from this, which will do the compression injuries right down the lower spine where she had some compression spots. So that's 3 injuries right there, all in that first half second or 3/4 of a second. Bam, bam, bam. Now as she does this, she's unconscious. Now you've got an unconscious person in a car that has likely got a swerve or two in it right at that point. Because again, you punch the windshield, you're gonna turn that left hand a bit on the wheel and you're gonna swerve. Now you have an unconscious person that does this, okay, for a second or two. Again, this is all in this first 2 seconds. Now that pipe, if I've turned, I can come back and I can hit it on an angle, so I can have the second cut be at a 90-degree angle to the first one. This is a smaller cut, less force. And that's likely to be the case. She's not forcing it into it. The pipe is now sitting there and not coming in with impact force. Smaller cut, smaller force. Makes sense in terms of this. Now she's flopped around and fallen down and can be starting to seize, from what I understand he's looking at. Certainly been a possibility that she's doing some seizure activity with this at this point because of the brain damage. Seizure activity can throw her into stuff as well a little bit, because that's a forceful action happening here below the neck. Her head's not necessarily doing anything with it, but if the body jerks, her head's going to move a little bit with it. So it's possible she's getting some further injuries or bangs that occur. Then you pull off the road and you try and take her out of the car. There is nothing harder to move than a human body that is unconscious. If you have ever tried to do this, and hopefully you never have to in your life, because usually it's a scary situation if you have somebody who's totally unconscious and you have to move them. Moving them from a bed, which is padded, is incredibly difficult. I mean, I can pick my wife up. She's not a gigantic woman, but if she was unconscious, it would be difficult for me to just pick her up out of a bed, because I don't have that much strength this way. I would have to wrestle her around a bit to try and get under so I can get my legs underneath to pull this. To get somebody out of a car that's unconscious, now I have done that. We have, in the ER, a number of times we've gone out, people will drive into the ER with someone who's passed out or had a heart attack and had their heart stop, and they'll be in the car, and to try and get them out of a car, you got 3 people, and it's still a challenge to do that because they're dead weight. And a car is an awkward space, and you try and move, and a leg gets caught because it hits on the hump, or under the dashboard, or clothing will catch. You're trying to rotate them around. When you can't cooperate, an unconscious body or a dead body, and I'm not saying dead that she was dead at that point, but from a movement standpoint, that it's so difficult to move people that you're going to do various grips and pulls to try and get them moving. That can account for some of the bruising that you saw on the legs. I mean, the calf stuff was directly behind the calves. Low, that's right where you're going to try and pull legs. And if you got adrenaline going because you think, oh my gosh, I got to get what's happening, you're using enough strength. Adrenaline adds a bit of power to stuff. I mean, that's when they talk about little old ladies lifting up cars. Something they could never ever do, but there are certainly many case reports of that when they had a huge adrenaline surge, they lift the car up to get a kid out from underneath. That's happened lots of times, and there's been certainly evidence of that. Again, all this is happening in an incredibly activated state by Mr. Kendhammer, trying to get his wife out of a car in an awkward situation, in a slant. If it looks like where the car is parked, that makes it even harder because gravity's working against you. And getting her out, there's going to be some glass, so there's going to be little nicks and scratches that are going to occur in various places.
Have you had occasion to,
Before you go on, Mr. Hurley, I just will note for the record, during that very lengthy narrative, none of the animation was made part of the record, and you need to use the microphone at all times.
Oh, sorry, okay.
Go ahead.
have you had occasion to see many glass injuries?
It's interesting, yes. One of the things about Dr. McCubbin, and I've not met her, and it's not a disparaging thing, she has been trained in a different era. This is the airbag era. Most of the years when we had the trauma center and we saw car accidents was the pre-airbag era. They are not the same. It is an entirely different world. In the pre-airbag era, we had glass. Every accident had glass. You had to watch when you're lifting people off the carts. Many a time, ER nurses or ER docs would get little cuts from glass on the carts because it is pervasive in those accidents. Now, we don't see those anymore. Glass is a little better, even though glass then was still pretty good. It generally particulated in little quarter-inch squares, and you would dig those out of people. On so many accidents, people had some of those embedded at various places. But there would be loose glass, and loose glass would have, some of it would have sharp edges. So certainly there was that risk happening. Now with airbags inflate right away because of all frontal stuff, and you never see glass on people. The accidents that have started occurring since airbags, it's rare to see people come in with glass on them. And this was an odd accident in that it's frontal, it's coming, it's similar to the old accidents in that there's going to be glass, but we're not in a frontal deployment of braking or airbags. So it's a different kind of animal than would normally present. This would be a rare kind of thing, obviously, to begin with a pipe, but a very rare kind of accident in terms of the glass injury than what you would see in almost all car accidents these days.
I'm going to show you on the screen what has been previously marked as Exhibit 7.
This is a photo of Mrs. Kendhammer's
Neck after the occurrence.
Have you had the opportunity to review this photograph?
Yes.
Directing your attention to the marks on her neck, can you state to a reasonable degree of medical certainty what is the cause of those marks?
That is a abrasive impact injury. Those scattered, almost looks like stretch marks, has that sort of appearance to stuff. That is an abrasive force. Your neck, if you're forward, your neck is pushed together. Your skin in your neck is pushed together. If you then have an abrasion injury that comes up to it, like this, impacting up, you're taking and abrading across that skin, which is why you get linear little patterns across it. It's not a broadband press on it. It's a linear scraping motion that will cause that kind of an injury.
Are the markings on Mrs. Kendhammer's neck on Exhibit 70 consistent with fingernail scratchings?
No. Fingernail scratching is first of all, linear, tends to be more up and down. It's hard to come across with fingernails. Yes, in certain situations you can get there, but they tend to be linear, they're deep, and they're parallel. In fingernail scratching where you literally want to put your fingernails into flesh, it's generally almost always more than one fingernail, and it's almost always a linear pattern from where they go, because it's pulling and drawing, it's cat claws, it's trying to get as much flesh as you can pulled towards you. But it's not this kind of a pattern, it's this kind of a pattern. It's a pull as hard as you can. That it isn't consistent with fingernails.
You said this was an abrasion.
And there's some bruising with it too.
Okay. And what does the bruising indicate to you?
Again, impact force.
So is it your belief to a reasonable degree of medical certainty that this is an abrasion caused in conjunction with an impact?
Yes.
I want to show you what was previously
previously marked as exhibit number 64. And here we see a bruise to the right jaw of Mrs. Kendhammer. Do you know what caused this?
This, again, you note the soft edges to this. I don't know what necessarily caused it, but these would be more typical of a pressure process on that area. It wraps around the jaw, which makes it hard for it to be a blow, because if you hit above rather than around. You can't wrap your fist around. And it's not a pressure area, again, because of the jaw. The angle of the jaw prevents stuff from being. Underneath you can press and put in. Up here you can get a little bit of pressure, but the jaw itself, the way our jaw sits, doesn't allow really for that to apply. It's not a pressure zone where you can apply a lot of pressure uniformly across the whole thing. Now, if it's sitting, again, indirect, when I say pressure, I'm talking about a blow type pressure. Passive pressure, which is what you see if we move continuously. You're contracting and uncontracting your butt muscles thousands of times every hour in subtle ways to move your skin as we sit, because we do a lot of sitting. We do that because if we don't do that, we will start to have problems with blood flow to the area. That's what pressure ulcers are. So when you take people who are paralyzed, the difference between them sitting and us sitting is they don't have those mechanisms to continue the flow of blood to the skin. A first-degree pressure ulcer also looks very similar to this. It has the appearance of flush skin because there's been pressure on it long enough that now the capillaries have suffered a little bit of damage. There's a little bit of leakage, and it's a soft-edged bruise. They're soft-type injuries. So this could be certainly consistent if she's laying in something on some position for a period of time against something. That can do that.
As in a hospital setting, for
It
example?
could be in the hospital setting. Sometimes you can see that, or collars, or even the seatbelt. If it's enough pressure where her head is before she gets out of the car, there can be enough pressure there to create a little bit of irritation on that.
In your opinion, is this injury consistent or inconsistent with a blow to the face with a fist?
It's inconsistent with a blow to the face with a fist because of the angle around the jaw. And there's also no swelling around that either.
When you were talking about the effect of having the cup in the lap, you said something about breaking a hyoid bone.
Which she had a broken hyoid bone. Your hyoid bone is a little ridge of a bone up under your tongue.
Is that the same as a cricoid fracture?
The cricoid fracture will be down in this area. You can separate where the hyoid bone, I thought I remembered the hyoid bone being broken in this, but your neck structure is supported. It's a U-shaped bone underneath here, right above where the cartilage is, and it helps support the floor of the mouth. When you impact here, that can certainly be disrupted.
I believe Dr. McCubbin's autopsy report referred to a cricoid fracture. Is the analysis any different?
No, this is all part of the anterior neck structures. You're hitting right into here.
And here you're lifting your head and...
I'm lifting my head and hitting right above the Adam's apple. At the Adam's apple and above is right where you're striking. That's all part of your anterior airway.
You stated that it was your belief that it was the large laceration on Exhibit 69 that would have been a fatal blows.
Yes.
And
Well, the brain injury resulting on that blow, yes.
and did the autopsy report document injury to her brain?
Yes.
After she was struck, after that blow was struck, would she have lapsed into a state of unconsciousness?
Yes. very likely.
And what happens to an unconscious person in a moving automobile that is different than what happens to a conscious person?
Any little movement is something you have no counterbalance to stop. This is why when they talk about there have certainly been many, many cases of people injured in car accidents by someone else in the car who wasn't restrained or was close enough to them that hit them. I have seen people hit by someone else's head in a car. I've seen people who were hit on the side, hit the side of their head on the door frame, got knocked out, and fell back over the other side, and with that side of their head struck the driver. When it was a passenger side one, I've seen such an injury. Your movements become exaggerated because you have no muscle control to slow or attenuate them. Everything is totally dependent on what's happening with the vehicle at the time.
So, for an unconscious person, what happens if the car swerves?
If the car swerves, you will go side to side in potentially a fairly violent fashion.
And what happens if the car turns a corner?
Again, it'll depend on which, you will go with the turn. Whatever way the turn goes, your body will go to that direction.
You've made some references to automobiles moving fast. What is fast in this context?
Basically, anything over 40 or 50 miles an hour. As a reference point to show you how much force is involved in motor vehicle accidents, they have these little trainer things someplace, I've seen them, where you can get in and you put a seatbelt on and it just goes down about a 3-foot ramp and stops. And what they have shown with that, when you have a seatbelt on, 15 miles an hour, which is the slowest we really drive cars in school zones, right at the bottom of your breastbone, there's a little tiny bone called the xiphoid. It's a little triangular shaped bone. And you can feel it right below your rib cage, right on the bottom of the breastbone. At a 15-mile-an-hour accident, when you come to a dead stop with a seatbelt on, that xiphoid touches your spine. Your whole chest has enough compression at 15 miles an hour to come in to touch your spine in the back. That's 15 miles an hour. So at 40 or 50 or 60, and if you combine any kind of things with the other vehicles, the amount of force is astronomical in accidents as to how much momentum there is. So at 40 or 50, there's lots of momentum.
In an occurrence where someone is unconscious and brakes have not been applied, will they move around in their seat?
If the vehicle's moving, yes, they will move around in their seat. Again, if you were sitting in your seat and you became unconscious with no other force acting and your car was going straight, you would slump. If you moved in any direction and became unconscious, whatever direction you moved in would be the direction you would start going, unless the vehicle moves side to side, front to back in any different fashion, and then that would follow. You would go in whatever direction, effectively the opposite direction of the car, but you would go depending on how the car moved, you would move accordingly.
And in such circumstances, do unconscious passengers acquire abrasions, bruises, etc. from the hitting the interior of the car?
Yes, they certainly can. And as a note, if any of you have ever been in a car accident, you notice how the next day there are areas that feel a little bit sore that weren't necessarily sore at the time. Some injuries are subtle, but you may not see a bruise, but internally you may have a little bit of damage or a little bit of contusion in a variety of areas. So it is common, even in accidents that we walk away from and do well, that we get subtle injuries that show up a little bit later that are not apparent right away. But it's common that there are multiple areas that will be involved, yes.
Do you have an opinion, to a reasonable degree of medical certainty, about whether Mrs. Kendhammer's injuries were the product of a beating.
I do. I do not believe they were the product of a beating.
And why is that?
It would not follow. If this was a beating, this would have to be a rage beating with the amount of injuries that are there. A rage beating, and I have seen one rage beating, rage beatings, for this to have two different head spots, first of all, rage beating's not going to happen in the car. You can't do that. There's no way you can effectively pummel somebody while you're in a car without going off the road and crashing. You can't strangle somebody with one hand while you're in a car. They can move, they can turn. That's not going to happen. With the blows that are here, to try and put something in position, you'd have to say, what happened first? If you did you try and strangle somebody first? If they're strangled and they're unconscious, then you said, all right, now I'm going to hit their head, but it's the back of the head, so I have to position their head before I hit it, because a normal blow, if they're laying on the ground, is going to be right here on the side of the head. In a position where the person is not unconscious and you have a rage process, you see defensive injuries. I have seen at a Little League baseball game a woman attacked by her husband with a baseball bat. She had both forearms broken because he came at her head and she naturally put her arms up. You defend yourself, so you see defensive injuries when the person is conscious and fighting back.
And did you see defensive injuries in this matter?
No. So, again, it doesn't make to try and account for all the injuries. If you're talking about crushing this, you got to lift her head up to hit it. That's an under the neck injury. It's hard to just come right down on the neck. If they're unconscious and they're laying there, you can't do it from the side. You have to position them. Nobody can. You don't set somebody up, move them around, position them to hit them in certain areas. Injuries in a rage process are generally all from one direction, one side, one process. Wherever I'm attacking you right there. And again, there's almost always defensive injuries in those.
In your examination of the photographs of the automobile, were you able to observe the various places in which there was a deposition of blood?
Yes.
Was that deposition of blood, in your opinion, consistent with Mrs. Kendhammer having initially been struck by a pipe?
Yes.
Can you try to explain to the jury why that is?
Well, there was no real significant blood, in spite of this injury in the back of her head, around the seats. Everything was forward and towards the door areas where any kind of blood. And there was a little bit on on the wheel outside, which was a tiny little splash, which would be consistent when you pull her out. If there's any bleeding off of the head wound and you move somebody, you can get little droplets of blood that will move or spray in a pattern about. Sometimes they spray, sometimes it's just a movement. You move ahead, and if there's active blood sitting there and drops, it will kind of fling off to the side. But it's not uncommon when you're dealing with bleeding. The bleeding pattern where the blood was found was consistent with a pipe hitting her and her being in the anterior position when that hit her as to where any blood was found.
We saw photographs of blood on a piece of paper on the console where the shifter is located and kind of dripping down on the passenger side of that console. Is that consistent with her having been struck in the head with a pipe?
The scalp is very vascular, and once in a while, I don't know if it happened here because there's no way to know that, but you can have wounds that literally pump, and they will send a little squirt gun somewhere between this and about like that away from the wound. You can have little spurts that will happen. Sometimes that happens very briefly, just for a squirt or two. Sometimes that happens for 15, 20 minutes. I certainly had to take care of those. And it will, the pattern will tend to be in the area where it is, but it's a fling pattern, or it's again like a squirt gun.
So you used the term vascular. You said the skull is vascular.
The scalp is vascular.
The scalp. Can you explain to the jury what that means?
There's a lot of blood vessels. It's an area that will bleed very freely. So when you get scalp wounds, they can often bleed quite a bit. And they're a little difficult, other than persons like myself who are follicularly challenged. When you have a lot of hair up there, it's also a little difficult trying to get in and find where some of the bleeders are, because once you have a little blood on there, it mats a bit, and there's that blood sort of sits within the hair and then is still able to shed off a little bit when it touches or comes up near stuff.
You mentioned some blood down near the rear passenger side wheel of the vehicle. I'm going to show you exhibit number 32. Is that to what you were referring?
Yeah, that's a small, that's all, like I said, like a little spray pattern, a little fling pattern of blood. If you pull somebody out of a vehicle and move them, you may well get a little slop of blood, but you'd expect, if that's where you hit, you're going to have a lot more bleeding. You're going to have a lot of blood that will wash around that area. When you move someone nearby, you may get a little spray or spurt of blood on there.
And if the person who was, let's assume for a minute that somebody was moved to that position, if the person was moved to that position and that person was in a hypoxic or anoxic state, would that affect the flow of blood?
It can. If they're not pumping, they're certainly going to have less blood that will come out for sure.
But do I understand correctly, is it your opinion that if someone had been struck in the head, as Mrs. Kendhammer was, at that location, one would see far more blood?
You would expect to see more blood. Plus, that's a circular rim. That's not, that doesn't really fit the kind of laceration on her head that that isn't what you would expect to see causing that kind of a laceration.
Why is that?
The depth and the spread of it, the shred portion of it, that's a wider process hitting it. This is more of a sharper, this is a narrower piece, and it's curved. You would see a curved laceration that was a cleaner laceration or a narrower laceration when it impacts.
Showing you again exhibit 69.
Yeah, that's a straight laceration. That's not curved. And it has that shredding in it, which is, again, typical of an impact force happening and pulling it apart or pushing it apart rather than anything that kind of cleaves or cuts down through.
Finally, I want to show you what's been marked as exhibit 13. This has been identified as a photograph of Mr. Kendhammer's hands after the occurrence. Did you have the opportunity to view this?
Yes.
Do you have an opinion to a reasonable degree of medical certainty about the cause of the injuries to Mr. Kendhammer's left hand?
Well, certainly consistent with striking the windshield, because that's a non-giving type of a surface to hit. You're hitting it rapidly, and you're hitting it basically with you're hitting both sets of knuckles with it. You're not leading, you're coming right up to it, so it's consistent with the mid knuckles and across your proximals and your mids is where you're hitting, and that's consistent with striking the windshield. More so than striking face. That's abrading all of them says you hit a hard object.
Did you, in reviewing Dr. McCubben's report of autopsy, did you have occasion, and in reviewing the medical records, did you have occasion to note whether at the time of intubation of Mrs. Kendhammer, they had to evacuate the passage?
I believe they found food. There was some food in the upper airway, yes.
And what does that tell you, if anything?
She ate recently.
Thank you, Doctor. I have no other questions.
Okay. Frankie?
Dr. Cook, have you testified about causation of death in a criminal case before?
No.
Have you been an expert witness in a homicide case before?
No.
Do you have any formal training in injury patterns?
In ER training, yes. ER training, it's not set up formally separately as, here we're going to take 6 months or 3 months and do a recognition pattern, but it is consistent in part of the training, in fact, ongoing with all new things that come out. Industrially, we get updates all the time on various things that can cause injuries and what kind of injuries to look for. So yes, I do get formal training with that.
Do you have any formal training in biomechanics?
Not specifically as biomechanics, but in the
Thank you.
mechanics of injury,
You
we
answered the
do.
question.
Okay.
Have you had any training in testifying about the origin of injuries?
Training and testifying about it, no.
Have you attended autopsies?
Yes.
When was the last one?
Probably 7 years ago.
Is that a normal course of emergency room work?
No. If there's,
Thank you. Have you reviewed police officer transcripts before in determining causes of injuries?
yes.
How often?
Not often. If the police come in and request, looking at us to look at things, we will look at stuff.
Have you reviewed police reports before in the
Yeah.
emergency room?
I have.
Have you reviewed suspect transcripts of interviews with police before?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Have you reviewed reports regarding analysis on windshield glass before?
As in what windshield glass can do, or what?
As you did in this case.
Not like Mr. Meacham's report. No, I had not reviewed a report like that before.
Any formal training in death investigations?
No,
Any training in crime scene investigations?
no,
Any training in blood spatter at the crime scene?
no,
Are you board certified in forensic pathology?
no.
Did you speak to the defendant in this case?
Just met him this morning.
In your report, you indicated that many of these items are the types of facts and data upon which an emergency medicine physician would normally rely upon. You don't normally rely on these items, do you?
Your question is not clear to me.
You don't normally rely on the types of things you saw in this case to express opinions.
I don't normally have to write a legal opinion, if that's what you're saying.
Is this the first time you've done this?
In a criminal case, yes.
Do you advertise yourself as a consultant or expert witness?
No.
How is it you got involved in this case?
There was a request because from the defense firm, as if I would look at it, because that they know my brother, who's also a physician, and ask if either he or I would look at it to see what we thought.
It was a request because somebody knew your brother.
Because they knew my brother, yes.
That's how they got to you.
Yes.
If you could pull up Exhibit 69 for me, turn on the computer, please. Dr. Cook, this is Exhibit 69. It's being shown. It's a little bit different orientation than the picture you had before, but it's a picture of the back of Ms. Kendhammer's head. You
Okay.
recognize that?
Yes.
And at the top of this picture would be the right of her head. Is that accurate? Her neck and her body would be to the right of this picture.
She's laying on
She's laying on her left side.
her left side. Yeah, okay, all right.
So the top of her head is to the left, the body to the right. Would you agree that that's?
I
picturing
believe that is correct.
I believe you testified that in this photograph, the injury on the top or the right side of her body would have been the first blow.
The longer laceration would have been the first blow.
And on this photograph with my laser pointer, it would be that one.
Yes.
That would be the right side of her head.
With a longer laceration, yes.
in your report, Exhibit 263, if it should still be up there, under section number 1, head trauma,
Yes.
didn't you say in that first paragraph that the object approached from the left, placing the left posterior scalp in the impact zone? This blow, the hardest one, likely caused a bulk of brain damage to Barbara Kendhammer before anoxia commenced.
I may have had my left and right from positioning mixed up with this, but the long laceration is the harder blow, harder laceration, and that's the one I believe caused the major brain damage that occurred.
Okay. Earlier in the paragraph said, when an unexpected object approaches an individual at high speed, it is a natural defense mechanism to turn one's head downward and rotate it away from the object. Do you mean that she would have ducked and turned to her right, away from an object?
In most situations, she would probably have ducked and turned to the right.
Okay. And then you then say it would logically follow that that would put the left posterior scalp in danger. Do you still feel that way?
Again, it depends on how far she rotated.
Well, I'm asking what you wrote in your report.
Well, in the report, I did say left side. I'm looking at how with impact force in turning, the first side you're going to turn towards it is your left side. So yes, your left side will be the first side that's there. Now, it depends on when the impact force occurs.
Okay. As she's turned to the right and down, you're indicating that the right posterior scalp would have been the first injury?
If she's rotated far enough, it could go off, that's where the first blow could take place.
And then the pipe would back up and hit the left?
The pipe doesn't back up.
I understand.
She moves.
Okay. You're aware that under the left laceration is where the skull fracture was?
Now again, I have not reviewed this for the last week, so between left and right,
Okay. Take a second.
if the skull fracture is under the left, then that would have been the first blow. That would have been the hardest blow.
Which would be in this picture, the bottom one.
Which in this picture would be the bottom one.
You're
All right.
changing your testimony from direct when you said it was the right one.
Well, then I'm saying that the hardest, the blow where the skull fracture occurred had to be the hardest blow. That would be impactively where you'd first have that.
That would
The
make
hardest
sense.
blow is likely to be the first blow when the pipe first came through.
I understand.
Okay.
Do you understand that that means that that would be the left side and not
Okay.
the right, as you testified earlier?
I have my left and right off on what I was saying with this, but yes, okay.
The pipe would hit the left side first. We agree on that now. That would be the largest amount of energy transferred to the head.
Correct.
The pipe would then skip, or she would somehow hit the right side, causing two lacerations. How?
Again, she bounced, you're gonna have an impact force going forward.
Yes.
If you're knocked unconscious with this and you're now loose, you hit this going forward and strike that under the neck, there's gonna be another blow to move back. You can rotate your head in the course of this. If the car has swerved at all, this can be a whoop, whoop, and you can turn and move just like almost a 90-degree angle would not be uncommon to move in a swerve, and then you can strike the pipe as it's sitting there again with the other area.
So the rebound backwards, as you're indicating, would land her right posterior scalp against the pipe, which would have been above her.
Pipe would probably have been, I'm assuming the pipe would have been somewhat above her and left, particularly if she was down.
And the rebound would have caused the posterior to the right injuries, two lacerations.
It would have caused the posterior injuries on the right, yes. The rebound would have caused the second laceration.
The pipe traveling, did you know how much the pipe weighed?
I probably saw it, but no, I don't.
10 pounds sound right?
Okay, I guess, certainly.
And you understood it was 53 inches long?
Yeah, I
10
knew
pound
it was
pipe.
like 4 feet, 5 feet long, yep.
Pipe described as coming off a truck if the speeds were 50 miles an hour, the pipe would be traveling 100 miles an hour at this point. You agree with that?
Certainly sounds realistic.
10-pound pipe going 100 miles an hour, do you have any idea how much force that creates?
A whole lot.
A lot of force. That amount of force hitting the left side of the scalp, I assume, as you said, it's not a Tarantino movie, so it wasn't a direct impact where you have a circular hole. It was a glancing blow.
Well, probably the side of the pipe, probably not even the end of the pipe.
Oh.
It was probably the side of the pipe that hit.
The side of the pipe hit or left side?
I think the
first,
side of the pipe hit both blows.
hit both. What would make the pipe stop after it comes through the windshield?
Well, there's friction on the windshield for one.
That's one.
It's, and I'm not sure the width of the pipe looked like it had a, whatever the
fitting?
end was, that may have impacted a little bit or slowed stuff down, if that was an irregular process. Just dissipation of energy coming through the windshield. You could have hit the seat, I suppose, if it had enough force to get through there, but that's, not necessary.
You believe that a 10-pound pipe going 100 miles an hour would have been slowed down by the windshield enough to just stop, not hit the rear seat, and then the side of it would be hitting her head?
Again, it's not a bullet projectile.
Well, it kind of is at going
I
10-pound pipe 100 miles an hour.
object to cutting off the witness.
Overruled.
On a length of pipe,
Answer the questions as asked. Finish your question.
A 10-pound pipe going 100 miles an hour pretty much is acting like a bullet, isn't it? A missile? It's a
well,
lot of force.
there's a lot of force, but there's some rotational force with it as well as, not like an arrow that just goes straight. There's a rotational force that will happen with objects when they hit stuff as well.
Okay. Well, just so it's clear, your testimony is it would have stopped for some reason, and then the longitudinal section of the pipe would have caused these injuries.
Yeah, I think the pipe moving by still has force as it comes in. There may be even a rotational force as it comes through the windshield that could add to the initial impact force. If she goes toward, and the pipe is moving in any fashion towards her, in addition longitudinally in any lateral fashion, that could add to that.
Okay. You also testified that her hyoid bone was broken.
It may not, when, on the report,
was
there
that
was
your testimony
damage
first?
within this area. So the hyoid may not
Dr.
have
Cook,
been,
was that your testimony?
if I said hyoid bone was broken, I knew I meant cricoid bone. Cricoid bone, the cricoid cartilage was broken, and there was separation by the hyoid. I misstated that.
You saw in the autopsy report the hyoid bone was intact.
Yes, but there was damage between the cricoid and the hyoid bone area in the report.
And the cricoid bone could be,
Well, it's a cartilage.
you're right, cricoid cartilage could be fractured by either a blow or pressure placed upon the neck.
Yes, it can be fractured by a blow or pressure.
The injuries that you described to the head, there were a few that you did not cover. There were at least 11 separate injuries to the head. Did you see them all in the autopsy report?
I looked at all the autopsy report photos and the written report, yes,
There was one abrasion to the left temple. Did you see that?
yes,
There was a contusion between the brows.
yes,
You saw that? There was a contusion of the superior forehead. You saw that?
yes. Actually, there was a little laceration up there too, I think.
As well as laceration of the middle forehead.
Mhm.
There was also the contusion of the right mandible, which you did describe,
Right.
correct? There was a contusion below the right earlobe, correct?
Yes.
There was a contusion to the left cheek, correct?
I don't remember that one, but yes, I believe that'd be correct.
There were contusions along with abrasions to the inside of the upper lip and the lower lip. You
Yes.
saw those. There was a nasal fracture, correct?
Correct?
And then we had lacerations to the back of her head. Now, those were all in separate areas of the head and different sides of the head, correct?
Correct.
Is it your testimony that she moved in all those different directions in order to cause all those injuries to the head?
Well, you can account for the neck and the oral ones with impact on this,
Okay.
so that can account for these. The jaw and the side of the head here could have been pressure-related ones. This, again, looks similar. It looked like there was something that was laying on that. It was a soft area of infusion, but not a hard bruise and there was no swelling to it. So the forehead area may have been a soft force impact, laying on something, pressing on something when you're unconscious. That can create that type of damage to the skin.
What would she have been lying on both sides of her head for what period of time?
If they took her out and dragged her on the ground, she could have been laying on anything that was a hard surface there. It could have been a rock. There could have been anything in the car itself. She could have been laying on, and if there was any other object in the car that was at least firm enough, a seat belt, if you're laying there, can be enough force here to press against that it can create. If you're just laying there with no other movement for a few minutes, that's going to potentially create a soft pressure area, because that's not a demarcated bruise, it's a soft pressure area. The bruise, or
Dr. Cook, I think you've answered the question.
Okay.
Can I have Exhibit 70, please? Doctor, this is Exhibit 70, which would be the photograph of the injuries to her neck. You indicated those were from the mug abrading the neck?
I believe they are.
Doctor, it appears that there were a number of separate abrasions. They do go in different directions, wouldn't you agree?
Yes.
And you believe that the edge of the mug would cause each of those individual abrasions?
You're compacting the skin at the time that the abrasion happens. If you have your neck forward when this occurs, your skin has folded on itself. And when you come across it at that point, it's like an accordion. When you stretch the accordion back out, you will see a variety of different things marked. So it's totally consistent with that.
With her neck being down, that would create, you say, folds in the skin like an accordion, if I
Right.
understand it right. Wouldn't that also protect the cricoid cartilage?
No, because the impact force comes up and into the cartilage. The anterior force comes into the cartilage. The skin doesn't act as any kind of a padding barrier to it. Your skin is thin here no matter what. The impact force coming back, I can leave the skin down, it can stay bunched, and I can press back on the cartilage quite easily and still put force on the cartilage without making the skin have to change. If this scrapes this, at the same time it comes in and up, and it can scrape the skin and impact the cartilage.
And what sharp edge on the mug will be scraping against her skin half a dozen to a dozen times?
The plastic right here,
And that broke
well,
the
it's not
plastic?
half a dozen to a dozen times. It's one scrape. It comes up all in one blow when it hits.
Okay. And it broke the plastic?
Probably did. That's a lot of force to break a cartilage. It's certainly, to come into the neck, that would be a lot of force if your body smacked down on it real hard.
And you understand that one piece of plastic would land on the dash, another piece down on the driver's side, and the mug end up on the driver's side floor?
Again, I wasn't aware exactly where everything's sitting in this, but afterwards it would not be atypical for anything. When a car swerves at all, and this has all happened, it could be anywhere in the car.
Would that mug have also caused the nasal fracture?
No, she may have had glasses on, because that's a common spot.
Wait a second, Dr. Cook, do you have any information that she was wearing glasses?
There were sunglasses found in the car.
There were sunglasses found on the floor of the driver's side. Do you have any information that she was wearing sunglasses?
I don't have information she was wearing sunglasses. What I'm saying is that's a typical pattern for glasses injury. When you have that across the bridge of the nose and there's an impact force, it does that exact kind of mark on the bridge of the nose. It's a common process. So if she had glasses on, if she was wearing those sunglasses, that can cause that.
What would hit the sunglasses?
Dashboard, whatever you have right in front of you. It doesn't have to be a hard impact. It can be a soft impact. It can be a padded dashboard when you press against there, and it can do that on the bridge of the nose.
And what caused a nasal fracture?
The force of this against the glasses hitting it can do that.
And the laceration of the forehead?
Forehead laceration is a sharp laceration.
Do you know that Dr. McCubbin indicated it was not a sharp laceration, it came from force?
It had very sharp edges with no swelling around it. It looked,
You disagree with Dr. McCubbin?
I looked like it was a sharp laceration. There was no swelling around the side of it.
You disagree with Dr. McCubbin then on that?
That, I've seen lots of lacerations that look like a sharp laceration, so I would disagree with Dr. McCubbin on that one.
You also indicated that she had a number of injuries on her body and legs, and you indicated some of that might have been come from pulling somebody out of a car.
Yes.
Do you have any information that she was pulled out of the car by her legs?
I think that no, I don't have specific information how she was pulled out of the car, except that when you, in my experience trying to get people out of a car, you have to try and get their legs around, because they will catch under the dash or other areas when you're trying to move them, and you end up with, it's difficult to get them out without getting their legs moved and free. So all the people I've had to get out of cars, and that's happened a number of times, you have to be able to move the legs in order to get them out of the car.
And the injuries on her legs could all account from somebody grabbing her legs and dragging her out.
Yes.
Do you understand that her shoes were off?
I
Found
knew
at
at
scene.
least one was. Okay.
There was a right shoe found inside the car,
Okay.
and the left shoe was found outside the car about 10 feet to the side. Did you know that?
I didn't know where the other shoe that it was found there, but okay.
In your report, you indicated that the injuries to her torso could have come from yard work the day before. Did you write that?
Bruising can certainly come from a variety of things, yes.
Do you have any information that she was doing yard work the day before?
No. My point being that they could be incidental.
There's testimony that nobody saw any injuries on her the day before. Would you take that into account, considering whether they came from this incident or yard work the day before?
My point was simply that it was possible some of these were existing injuries.
Could I have Exhibit 79? Dr. Cook, this is Exhibit 79. It's a photograph of Mr. Kendhammer's left hand.
Okay?
When you were demonstrating on direct examination, you were using your right hand to punch the windshield. Do you believe that he used his right hand to punch the windshield?
No, well, that would be his left hand that punched the windshield.
There were actually injuries to both hands.
Okay?
Do you understand that?
The right hand didn't, I mean, these are much more significant and would be consistent with a harder hit to the knuckles to create that much abrasion.
You understand Mr. Kendhammer told police he hit with both hands and people observed injuries to both hands.
Okay?
Do you believe that he hit the windshield with both hands
It certainly is possible.
while you're driving to reach out with both hands and hit the windshield?
Again, your reaction is instinctive here. It's not something you think of or plan. It's an instinctive reaction. So both hands would certainly be possible.
Could I have Exhibit 81? This is Exhibit 81. This would be photographs of Mr. Kendhammer's left side. Have you seen that before?
Yes.
And you indicated before that fingernail scratches tend to be linear and parallel, but those appear to be fingernail scratches on the left side of his neck.
I don't believe so.
This would be Exhibit 82. Scratches on the right side of his neck. Do you believe those would be fingernail scratches?
I don't believe so.
This would be Exhibit number 83. There's parallel linear lines. Do you think those would be fingernail scratches?
I don't believe so.
Okay. The defendant had injuries to both hands, injuries to both sides of his neck, his chest. The victim had injuries about her head. You're saying that's inconsistent with a fight?
In this situation, I don't believe it was a fight.
Do you think these injuries are inconsistent with a fight? You've got fingernail scratches, abrasions, bruises.
You can sustain those type of injuries in a fight, if that's what you're asking.
You indicated that in a beating you would expect to see defensive injuries, is that right?
That is correct.
Did you see the bruises to the back of Ms. Kendhammer's left hand?
On the left hand, I do recall that she had a bruise, yes.
Consistent with covering up oneself and getting struck in the hand?
I did not feel that was a classic defensive type injury.
You understood that she had broken nails, at least one broken nail?
I remember one broken nail.
And you understand that Mr. Kendhammer's DNA was found underneath her nails?
Okay.
You think that's inconsistent with a struggle?
I don't know what that's consistent with. I don't think that's inconsistent with the struggle, but I don't know that that represents a struggle.
Exhibit 32, please. Dr. Cook, this is exhibit number 32, and this is blood on the ground as well as on the tire, the rear passenger tire. Okay. Do you see the blood on the ground, on the grass?
I am colorblind, but I believe that that represents blood next to the wheel there, yes.
Okay. And the next exhibit will be 33. You may not be able to see it, I apologize, but another blood right in front of that other spot of blood.
Okay.
And then this is exhibit 35, I believe,
Okay.
showing blood spots on the tire.
Okay.
And the next exhibit showing blood, what appears to be blood transfer or blood on the rim of the tire.
Okay.
The rim of the tire is a linear surface, is it not extending upwards, it's up to the right?
It is a curved linear surface, yes.
Well, the rim
The
is
straight
curved
rim,
and
yes. The rim, you're talking about the spoke of the rim.
correct.
Yes, that's a linear surface.
And you indicated that it would have been difficult to have a beating within the car, mostly because it might have been moving. Is that right?
Yes, you're driving and it's a fairly, as much as it's an enclosed space, it's a spacious, there's still a fair amount of room for escape.
If the car was stopped, though, that would be possible to have a beating inside a car while it's stopped.
It would be possible, but again, it's a limited space for a variety of things in terms of force.
Sure. And beating could have happened outside the car, given the blood we find near the rear tire.
That would be certainly possible.
And many of the injuries could have been sustained outside the car, for example, pressure on the neck causing a cricoid fracture,
Correct?
injuries to the face, scratches to the necks.
Correct.
That's all I have.
Doctor, in your report, you state the following. Motor vehicle accidents involve a myriad of forces and movements that often result in constellations of injuries. What did you mean by constellations of injuries?
Well, as I stated before, in even small accidents, the next day you find areas that are sore. The amount of force is absorbed in various areas of your body. And some of them will have harder or more force absorption than other areas, and so the injuries can vary according to the force. Objects within the car can be things that create injuries. Door frames, things along the dashboard, things that you are holding, and those vary from accident to accident. And in various accidents, I have seen a number of those kinds of things come into play, where people have gotten injured from something moving about within the car, someone bouncing within the car, hitting various things within the car, and the injuries can be from belly injuries to chest injuries to head injuries. All can occur in the course of an accident.
Now,
Spinal injuries.
you were asked some questions about whether you'd ever served as an expert witness in a homicide case before,
Correct.
and I believe you said you had not.
Correct.
Have you ever served as an expert witness in a legal matter before?
Twice.
And in those cases, were you asked about cause or origin of injury?
Yes.
And when one attempts to determine cause or origin of injury, does one look for guidance from constellations of injury?
Yes. You try to establish, and it also, when you see one type of injury from an emergency medicine standpoint, you're also trying to think what other things are often associated with that may not show up right away that I don't want to miss. So certain things alert you to patterns that you want to start looking for.
In this case, were you able to determine the cause or origin of every single scrape or bruise on Mrs. Kendhammer?
No.
Is it possible for anyone looking at Mrs. Kendhammer's autopsy report, photographs, and medical records to come to a conclusion about the cause or origin of every single scrape or bruise on her body?
I do not think that would be possible, not based on the history of how this all transpired.
And is that why one has to look at constellations of injury?
It certainly makes a big difference, and you have to assess what's the worst ones, where it happened, and march your way on down from there.
And when you viewed this record and the constellations of injury, to what conclusion did you come?
I came to the conclusion that this was an incredibly bizarre accident, and that it occurred in as close as was realistically rememberable as Mr. Kendhammer had stated. I think, again, there is so much that happens in such a short span of time that it's difficult to recall every little detail about what had occurred.
You're object to this opinion, competence.
Sustained.
Doctor, you were asked by Mr. Grunke about whether you knew Mr. Kendhammer said he struck the windshield with both hands. Do you recall that?
Yes.
Do you recall in your review that at one point he said, apparently not as hard with my right hand?
Again, it's been a while since I have looked at that part, so I don't specifically recall that, but yes.
Do you recall that on another occasion he said, I had my right hand on the wheel?
I think I remember that, yes.
You were asked by Mr. Grunke about two automobiles coming at one another with a combined speed of 100 miles an hour. Do you recall that?
Yes.
Did that question encompass an assumption about, one, the speed of an oncoming vehicle, and two, the notion that the pipe came from the oncoming vehicle?
Yes.
I want you to assume for a minute that the pipe didn't come from an oncoming vehicle, but was kicked up by either an oncoming vehicle or a passing vehicle.
Objection assumes facts, not evidence.
I'm asking him to make the assumption.
Rule.
If you make that assumption, the pipe would come at the Kendhammer vehicle with considerably less force. Is that correct?
That would be correct.
While you can't give an opinion about the cause or origin of every single abrasion or contusion to Mrs. Kendhammer, in your examination of Mrs. Kendhammer, was there any abrasion, contusion, laceration that was inconsistent, in your opinion, with injuries that were initiated by a pipe coming through the windshield and the subsequent movement of Mrs. Kendhammer within and without the vehicle?
I did not find anything inconsistent.
Let me show you exhibit number 32 again. May I have the envelope, please? And here I believe it was your testimony that this portion of the wheel rim was linear.
Yes,
Is that correct? Whereas this portion of the wheel rim is curved,
correct,
as is this portion, is that correct?
correct.
And where, let's assume for a moment that a head struck that wheel rim with force. Would you expect then that you would see a linear and or curved lacerations?
Yes,
In other words, if a laceration was caused by hitting the curved portion, would you expect that laceration to be curved?
yeah, that's a fairly sharp metal, so it should make a curved laceration.
I'll show you again the lacerations to Mrs. Kendhammer. Are these curved?
No, they are linear.
I believe Mr. Grinke prefaced a question to you by representing that Mr. Kendhammer's DNA was found under Barbara Kendhammer's fingernails.
Yes, I would say that, just in note to that, right now,
But before you go ahead, were you provided with the reports of the crime laboratory in their analysis of Mrs. Kendhammer's fingernails?
no,
Were you aware that those fingernails were not scraped?
no,
And so you wouldn't have been aware either then that the fingernails were just put in a wash?
okay, no.
I have no other questions.
I was gonna say, that
Objection, Your Honor, there's no question here.
Sustained. Rick, any other questions?
No.
This time, does any juror have a question of Dr. Cook? Couple? Three? Okay. All right, there were 4 questions from the jury, 527 through 530. I can only ask 530. Could the neck abrasions have been caused by glass or the seat belt rather than the Bubba mug?
seatbelt can do abrasions along those lines. In general, you have to have a lot of rotational force to get far enough up the seatbelt for it to do it, but that's not an impossibility with it. And yes, the glass on that picture, the 2 or 3 areas that looked like they were little scabs or little, they were almost round or square areas, those are certainly consistent with glass cuts. That's exactly what glass cuts look like when you get them in an automobile process. It's fragmentary stuff, and you get little cuts and little bleeds. It's all tiny little nicks and cuts. So yes, could be very consistent with that. Seatbelt can cause abrasion process to the neck, but the reason they put the seatbelt harnesses and everything the way they've designed them in cars is so that you tend not to, even if you fall to the side, have the neck be the primary area where impact force occurs.
All right, thank you. Again, don't take any notice or heed of questions I could not ask. All right, we'll take our break at this point.
Can I see Exhibit 530 again? There's no checks.
Right.
1 second.
Okay. We'll take our morning recess. You step out, enjoy your break. Don't talk about the case. We'll have you back in maybe 15 to 20 minutes.
Please rise.
You may all be seated. All right, Director can show we're back in the courtroom outside the presence of the jury. So what's your next witness?
Mr. Kendhammer.
All right. Mr. Kendhammer, you understand you have an absolute constitutional right not to testify in this case?
Yes, Your Honor.
You understand that it's the state's burden to prove each and every element of the offense, and you don't have to do anything to defend yourself if you don't want to. You understand that?
Yes, Your Honor, I do.
You feel you've had enough time to talk to your attorneys to come up with your decision as to whether you should testify or not?
Yes,
Is that your decision?
it's my decision.
All right. Anything else on that issue, Mr. Grinke?
No.
Mr. Hurley? All right. Right, if they're ready, you can bring them in. All right, you may all be seated. Mr. Hurley, you'll be calling your next witness?
Yes, I
Proceed.
call Todd Kendhammer.
Under penalties of perjury, do you solemnly, sincerely, and truly declare and affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this matter shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Please state your name. I think the reporter knows how to spell it.
Todd Allen Kendhammer,
How old are you, Mr. Kendhammer?
47,
And where were you born?
La Crosse, Wisconsin.
And were you raised in La Crosse?
Yes, I was.
Have you lived here all your life?
Yes, I have.
Where'd you go to school?
I went to Logan High School, Logan Middle School,
And when did you graduate from high school?
1988.
What were the names of your parents?
Robert and Patricia Kendhammer.
And has your dad passed away?
Yes.
Is your mom still living?
Yes, she is.
Is she here in the courtroom?
She's sitting in the second row.
After high school, well, while you were in high school, did you become employed?
Yes, I did.
Where'd you become employed?
A1 Glass Company.
And what'd you do there when you were in high school?
I started cleaning, sweeping floors, washing vehicles, stuff like that.
And what year of high school did you start working there?
I started in my freshman year, 1984.
After you graduated high school, what'd you do?
I was employed full-time by A1 Glass.
And when you were employed full-time, what were your duties?
I started as a auto glass and residential glass installer and a shop technician.
So as a auto glass and residential glass installer, tell the jury about what those duties entail.
Well, an auto glass installer, A1 Glass both does mobile and in-shop auto glass. They covered a very wide range, so I was on the road a lot, just over the day, not overnight, installing windshields mobily for people that worked or didn't want to leave their home to get their glass put in.
After you served for a while, well, let me go back. For how long did you stay at A1?
I was at A1 8 to 10 years.
And while you were there, did you always just stay on as a glass installer?
No, I eventually became an officer in the company.
And what was your office in the company? Do you remember?
I don't remember what it was, for sure. I was shop manager, and then I got an office title, or a position.
Was there a time when you discussed becoming an owner of the company?
Yes.
And just very briefly, what was that about?
The owner at the time was wanting to sell out, retire, and I and another guy he was gonna be the office person, I was gonna be the shop person, and we split the duties, and that's when we became officers in the company.
And did you eventually become an owner?
I did not become an owner.
And why was that?
The owner was having an affair with one of the office girls, and it was bringing the morale down of the company. And I, being the shop end of the company, brought it to the attention, and I got terminated.
After you left A1, where'd you go next?
I went to Glass Service Center in La Crosse.
And how long were you there?
I was there 3 years the first time.
And what'd you do there?
Same duties: auto glass, storefronts, residential glass, shop glass.
And you said you were 3 years the first time. What occasioned your leaving after 3 years?
I went to I gotta think of this. There was the dad owned the company. There was 4 brothers involved in it, and they were buying the dad out. So it was 4 bosses that were there taking the position of 1. And it was too hard to work for 4 people that were in the company all at the same time.
So when you left, where'd you go after that?
From the first time I left Glass Service Center, I went to UPS.
And what'd you do for UPS?
I was a package delivery driver.
And how long were you there?
I was at UPS for 2 years, approximately 2 years.
And what occasioned your leaving there?
I had a family. I had young kids. We wouldn't start till 9 in the morning, 9:30 sometimes, and you wouldn't get done till 7:30 at night. And I didn't like for the family life, it wasn't for me.
So after you left there, where'd you go?
I went back to Glass Service Center.
And how long did you stay there?
A year.
And was it the same duties that you'd previously had there?
Yes.
And why'd you leave after a year?
I same reasons, just with the 4 people trying to run it, and I had a different job offer.
So where'd you go for that different job offer?
I went to Linex in West Salem.
And what is Linex?
It's a truck accessory spray-on bed liner.
Spray-on bed liner,
Yes.
did you say? And,
Yeah.
And what did you do there?
I dealt with customers, did the spray-on bed liners, put truck accessories on, stuff like that.
Did there come a time where your duties there began to change?
Yes. I had so many people wanting me to still do glass, and so I started a small glass shop out of the Linex building. I rented the spot from him.
And what did you do with that glass shop?
Everything, auto glass, primarily auto glass, but we did every kind of residential glass, storefront glass, and auto.
Did there come a time when you partnered with somebody else in this venture?
Yes, I did.
You want to tell the jury about that?
We lived in town at the time. The neighbor that I had at the time owned an exhaust shop on the south side of La Crosse. He knew I needed to expand. He came over one night and said, "Hey, I need to get out of La Crosse, the south side of La Crosse." So he asked if I would consider building a shop together with him. So we partnered up. With my equity and everything, we built a building in West Salem, and we combined the 2 businesses.
How long were you involved with that business?
I was involved with that business after we built the new building for about 3 years.
And after 3 years, did you leave?
Yes, I did.
Why'd you leave?
When he and I agreed to do the business, it was he and I, no wives. His wife started getting involved. We just had business differences, and so he bought me out.
And after that, where'd you go?
I went back to Glass Service Center for 1 more year,
And after a year, where did you go from there?
to Crown Cork and Seal.
And how long were you at Crown Cork and Seal as of September 16, 2016?
9 years.
What did you do at Crown Cork and Seal?
I started as a general laborer, which is just cleaning, running, chasing lines out when you're changing labels, painting, whatever they just, helping out in the plant. And then I went up to spray machines. It's a progression job, so you got to work your way up in the plant. I went to spray machines, and then from there I got to become a line maintainer.
And what does the line maintainer do?
A line maintainer's primary duties are we make aluminum pop cans, and they come in a roll of coil aluminum, and we punch it into a can, and then we decorate it to all the different Pepsi, Coke, whatever label we're doing that day. And I was running the decorator, and then if something would go down on the line, our duty was to, if we had 2 people in the decorator, one of us would leave to go get the line back up.
And when did you become the line maintainer?
April. Oh, it was 3 years. It took me 3 years to get fully progressed.
Okay. And at what point were you fully progressed in the position?
I want to say it was April of 2016.
And when you were fully progressed, did that entail getting a raise?
Yes.
And when you got that raise, what was your hourly rate?
On the day hourly rate, it was $29 an hour.
You say the day hourly rate, why?
Because nights was $1 more premium.
When you were working at Crown in that position, how many days on, how many days off did you have?
We worked a 4-on, 4-off schedule. So if you work Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday of this week, you'd have Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday off, and then you'd work Tuesday through Friday the following week. So every week you rolled back a day in your schedule.
And were those 8-hour days?
There were 4 12-hour days.
Was overtime available?
Yes, it was.
And how does one get overtime?
It goes by how many days you've worked. So as far as when they come out to ask for overtime, if you were the low man on the pole, you would get asked first. And you could take 1 or all 4 days. You could take whichever days you want. The first 3 days were premium pay. It was time and a half. The last day was double time pay. So regardless what day you took, you could take 1, 2, 3, or 4. You could take the last. First and last was real common.
Did you ever work overtime?
Yes, I did.
How frequently?
It would depend if it was in the middle of the week or not. Very seldom would I work a weekend for overtime.
Was there something there called shift cycle pay?
Just 1 second, Mr. Hurley. Somebody has their cell phone on. It needs to be confiscated. Turn it over to the deputy. Thank you. You may continue.
Was there something called shift cycle pay?
Yes, there was.
And what is that?
Well, at Crown Cork and Seal, because we run 24 hours a day, normally 365 days a year, you have an A crew and a B crew. And they're 12-hour shifts, so you work 6:30 in the morning till 6:30 in the evening, and that's a day shift, and that would be the Monday through Thursday to start. And then you'd have the Friday through Monday, which would be the B crew. Every other year you could switch nights to days, but every 2 years you could switch A crew to B crew. If you, every January, because nights and days would switch, you may get bumped nights to days. So if you got bumped from your normal shift, say I was on B1 and I got bumped to B2, if you didn't take it, they would offer you a day off between there. So you could cycle your pay and get through that, or you could work straight through. If you chose to work straight through, you got cycle pay. So you get all your overtime pay for the next week, which would be time and a half, time and a half, time and a half, and double time. So that's what cycle pay was.
There was a question asked of you during your interview at the La Crosse County Sheriff's Office, having to do with why you were calling in or intended to call in on the 16th of September in 2016. Do you recall those questions?
Yes, I do.
On the 16th of September in 2016, Did you intend to call in?
Yes.
Now, what does it mean at Crown to call in?
If you don't get individual holidays, you have to take your vacations. You have to take your vacations in a cycle, which is your 4 days off, or your 4 days on would be your vacation time. So you can't use them individually.
Does
So if
that
you-
mean there was a minimum of 4 days which you had to claim as vacation if you took vacation?
Yes.
Could you take 1 day at a time?
No.
Was there a point system at Crown?
Yes, there was a point system.
And how did the point system work with respect to taking a day off?
Normally your day shift supervisor and night shift supervisor would come in an hour to an hour and a half early for their shift. If you wanted to call in for your shift, you normally would wait for your supervisor to come in, which was an hour and a half before your shift, or right at the start of the shift. So if you wanted to use a sick day, you'd call your night supervisor. They had a call line you could call, but it never got back to the supervisor, so we just called direct to the supervisor's office to call in for a sick day.
And if you called in for a sick day, did that give you a point?
If you called in within 2 hours of your shift, so if your shift started at 6:30 and you called in by 8:30, you got 1 point. If it was after 8:30, you got 2 points.
And how many points were you permitted to accumulate before there was any discipline?
At 5 points, you got a verbal warning. At 6 points, you got a written warning. At 7 points, you got a meeting pending suspension.
Why did you choose to call in a sick day on September 16 as opposed to taking a day off to which you might otherwise be entitled?
By taking the sick day versus the cycle off day, I would have got time and a half, and double time for my next 3 days.
And on September 16, was it your intention to come back to work on Saturday, Sunday, and Monday?
Yes,
Now, on September 16, were you working day shift or night shift?
I was on day shift.
There was some question of you during an interview about Barb being upset about your working night shifts. Do you recall that?
I do recall that.
Was there about to be a time that you were going to go on the night shift?
Yes, there was.
Can you explain to the jury the circumstances of your going on the night shift?
Yes. As I explained, there's your seniority will hold you where your position is. There's certain times of the year when a new maintainer will be put into the pool, you may be bumped from one crew to the other to keep the crews even as far as knowledge and experience goes. Well, in this particular case, when I first got into maintainer group, I worked nights for a while because I couldn't hold seniority. In this particular case, there was a younger fellow that was in the plant, got into maintainer. He had 2 very small children, and he had until January that he was going to be bumped to nights. And with amongst talk at the plant, it was going to very much inconvenience his daycare with these 2 little kids. So I went home and talked it over with my wife, and we were in the same situation at one time. And we said for them couple months, we could do the night thing. And we had agreed that I could take his position, let him stay in my day shift, and I would take the night position for those couple of months.
Was this something that Barb had agreed to?
Yes.
Now, I want to talk to you about Barb. When did you meet Barb Kendhammer?
I met Barb in 1986.
And what was Barb's maiden name?
Barbara Carol Adams.
And by the way, are Barb's parents still alive?
Barb's mother is.
And is she here?
Yes, she is. She's sitting in the front row.
what were the circumstances, or under what circumstances did you meet Barb?
I was at her brother's wedding at the time when I met Barb.
And who was her brother?
David Adams, the guy sitting right next to Barb's mom and his mom.
And why were you at the wedding?
He married my cousin. David married my cousin Rhonda.
And tell the jury about meeting Barb on that day.
I wasn't a real outgoing, into sports and stuff. Was more of the, doing things in the shop and like that. And we went to the wedding because we have a very tight-knit family. And Barb was at her junior prom, and she came in with a couple of her friends. And when she walked in, I went to my cousin Rhonda and asked her who it was. There was something, just the way she was. I talked to her a little bit. It was a picture book saying, just one of these things where you know immediately, that's the girl you want. That's the girl I want to talk to. I want to get to know this girl. And that's the feeling that I had the first time I met Barb.
How old were you?
16. I told you I was 14, but I mistake that with when I started at A1 Glass.
And what year in school were you then?
1986.
Yeah, but sophomore or
Junior.
How long was it before you learned that Barb had a boyfriend?
I knew it right away.
How'd you know that?
I asked Rhonda.
And did that deter you in pursuing Barb?
No, because I wasn't pursuing her as a girlfriend at the time. I wanted to get to know her, see who she was, how she was. I had a feeling that I wanted to, but I did not pursue it like that at first.
So what'd you do?
Just hung out with her, did stuff together.
What kinds of things did you do together?
We went mud bogging, we went four-wheeling, snowmobiling, walking, talking, go down to Riverside, a lot of stuff like that. We had a lot of stuff in common.
For how long did you remain friends with her while she was dating another guy?
3 years.
Did there come a time when her relationship with the other guy ended?
Yes.
What happened then?
We still were like we always were, friends, and didn't jump into nothing. It was shortly after that when we started dating. It was probably almost a year after that before we started dating.
When you started dating, did that change things?
Not really. It changed how I would talk to her and express to her, as far as how when you say you love her and like that, that changed. But the feelings I had for her, I didn't have to impress myself for her, and she didn't have to impress herself for me. We had a very mutual relationship.
Did there come a time when you asked her to marry you?
Yes.
When was that?
1990, mid-1990,
And when were you married?
1991,
What was the day?
August 3rd.
Before I forget, are you left-handed or right-handed?
Right-handed.
And was Barb left-handed or right-handed?
Right-handed.
Your Honor, we have marked exhibits 265 through 270, and I believe the prosecution and the defense have agreed that they're admissible.
Is that correct?
Yes.
265 through 270
That's correct, Your Honor.
will be received.
I have the- almost-
I'm going to show you what's been marked as exhibit 265. Can you see that? I don't know if that's better or worse. Are you able to see that?
Yes,
Who is that?
my wife and I.
And when was that taken? Approximately what year?
That was in 1988, 89.
How can you remember that well?
It was in 89 because that's when I started dating her.
Do you remember what event that occurred?
Yes,
What event was it?
it was her birthday.
After you got married, did you have any children?
Yes, I had two,
2 children. What are their names?
Jessica and Jordan.
And how old is Jordan?
Jordan is 23.
And how old is Jessica?
Jessica is 24. 25.
Is Jessica married?
Yes, she is.
And who did she marry?
Michael Service.
And how do you spell service?
Servivais.
And your son Jordan, is he married?
No, he's not.
Throughout this, has Jordan had a girlfriend?
He has, yes.
And what is her name?
Jordan.
So how do you distinguish between the two?
Boy Jordan, girl Jordan.
Does Jordan have a nickname as well?
Yes, he does.
And what's his nickname?
George.
Does girl Jordan share that nickname?
Yes, she does.
I'm going to show you a picture that is Exhibit 266. You recognize it?
Yes, I do.
What is that?
Our Christmas card.
Do you know from about what year?
A year ago. Or 2 years now.
Is that you and Barb in the center?
Yes, it is.
And who is that to the left in the picture?
To the left would be Jordan and Jordan.
And to the right, who is that?
Michael, Jessica, and Carlin.
And who's Carlin?
Our granddaughter.
Last year, did you celebrate your 25th wedding anniversary with Barb?
Was it last year or 2 years?
Well, you've got to tell me. Last year was 2016.
Yes, so it was last year, yes.
I'm going to show you Exhibit 267. What's that?
Cake at our anniversary party.
Now, had you planned an anniversary party?
No,
How did that come about?
our kids and our moms and brothers, I think, were involved, maybe surprised us with a party.
And I'm going to show you Exhibit 268. Is that you and Barb?
Yes,
When was that taken?
at Michael and Jessica's wedding.
Show you Exhibit 269. Is that you and Barb?
Yes, yes.
When was that photograph taken?
After our anniversary party, we just took a drive and we went up to Superior and all around and just took a week and didn't make no plans, just went where we wanted to do, and we went hiking and did whatever we wanted to do.
And we're going to show you Exhibit 270. Who's that?
My wife and I and our granddaughter.
Were you pleased about having a granddaughter?
Yes, we were.
Having grandchildren's not a bad gig, is it?
No, it's not.
What kind of things, well, let me withdraw that and ask it different. I'd like for you to describe for the jury a typical day for you and Barb in 2016.
If I worked or if I was off.
What would be typical?
Well,
Well,
if
let's do one of each,
okay, if I didn't work, I always got up with Barb when she was getting ready. I would help. I'd make oatmeal. If she was gonna eat breakfast, she ate oatmeal or yogurt or honey and toast. And I would always make that when she got close to being ready. I would always make her breakfast for her. We'd get ready. We'd talk a little bit if she was ready early. I would take her to work, and then I would do different things while she was at work. Then when she got done with work, if she had something that she didn't like at work for lunch that day, we'd always go get a little snack or something after work, and then we'd either go home, take a walk, go home, make supper, go home, mow lawn, go home and eat supper, and then go get ice cream, and we'd sit down, maybe take another walk after dinner, and then we'd just watch a little TV and go to bed. If I worked, when she got done with work, I would always get up with her in the morning still, but I would be gone before she'd get ready and stuff. I always called her. I knew when her breaks were, so I would either take break when her breaks were and call her or text her, or when she got done with work, I'd always call her a little bit after 2 o'clock to see how her day was and talk and stuff. She always had a big dinner made when I got home. Always had something big to eat. It wasn't ever, a frozen meal or like that. It was always something. She loved to cook. I'd come home from work, we'd eat dinner. Usually we'd take a walk, and then that would be our night. Sometimes we'd go for ice cream, but usually when I was off work, we'd do the ice cream thing. That was our usual routine.
In 25 years of marriage, except when you were each at work, were you ever apart?
Very seldom.
Can you remember what times you might have been apart that you weren't at work?
Well, deer hunting was the only time I was. There was 11 of us that went deer hunting in a cabin,
When
and
you say 11 of us, who would these people be? Are they relatives or friends?
yes, all relatives. My brother and his kids, my son Jordan, another cousin and their kids. It was all family. We'd go deer hunting Friday. We'd go over to the cabin, get a fire, make some dinner or something, drink a little beer, whatever. Well, Friday night, I would go home for an hour or two, just talk to Barb, see how her day was. And if she had dinner, I'd eat a little bit with her. If she didn't, she'd go to the holiday fair or something. And then I'd go back over to deer camp. And then Saturday night, I would go home again. But I was away from her all day.
Did the other married men in the party do this too?
No. Nope.
Were they very understanding of your going home on deer hunting weekend?
It was deer camp, I had to put the shoulder pads on. I got a lot of grief for it, but I did it for 25 years and never had a problem with it.
Other than deer camp and when you were at work, were you ever apart from Barb?
No.
Did you do everything together?
Yes, we did.
If you had to shovel snow, what would she do?
She'd be right there with me.
If you had to mow the lawn, what would she do?
She'd pick up the weed eater and weed eat right with me.
If you were, by the way, I didn't ask before, did you, after you went to Crown, did you continue to work in auto glass?
Yes,
Is this something you did on the side?
yes.
If you were replacing someone's auto glass, would Barb be there with you?
Yes, she would. We did everything in shop. In-house, I mean.
Were there things you did for Barb that were unusual?
Yes.
What were those things?
I would, if it snowed, I would take her car down, halfway down the driveway for her so she didn't have to go down the steep part at the top. And if I was home, I would actually take her down, take her to work. But if I had to work, I'd take her car halfway down and leave it there, and she'd have remote start, so she wouldn't have to go down the driveway by herself. Barb was a real clean freak. And a big pet peeve of Barb's was when guys stood up to pee. And I respected her enough to sit down at home to pee.
For 25 years?
Yes, I did for 25, actually, yep, 25 years.
Did you always vacation together?
Yes,
If you went to the grocery store, did you go to the grocery store together?
yes.
If you went to the bank, did you go to the bank together?
Unless she went after work, yes, I went with her.
Did you go for drives together?
Yes.
How frequently did you do that?
We did it when I first met Barb. Her mom and dad went for drives almost every Sunday, and we went a lot with them. And when Barb's dad passed away, we kind of continued the tradition. Her brother would go with sometimes, and we went for drives quite often.
Did you go camping together?
Yes,
How frequently did you camp?
we camped quite often in the summer.
Did you both enjoy camping?
Yes, very much.
Let me just ask you briefly, because I'll come back to it. We heard in interviews of you reference to Cranfest.
Yes.
Can you tell the jury, if they don't know already, what Cranfest is and what it was for you and Barb?
Cranfest is a yearly event up in Warrens, Wisconsin. It's thousands and thousands of craft people. There's different foods, but it's mainly all crafts. The whole town of Warrens shuts down for Cranfest. It's a Friday, Saturday, Sunday deal. And then every year Sunday, they have a big parade. Barb's family went even before I met Barb. And when I met Barb, it was something that we started doing. Cranfest for us was a yearly thing. We went up the weekend before because we stayed in the county park. And if you didn't get up there beforehand, you wouldn't get a campsite. So we always went up the week before to set up camp and have the camper there, and we'd leave it all week.
Is this something you did alone with Barb, or did you do it with other couples?
We did it with several other couples.
Were the couples all family, or was it family and friends?
There was some friends, but mostly family.
And the weekend of September 16 in 2016, was that Cranfest, or was it the weekend before Cranfest?
The weekend before.
And on that day, was it your intent, tell the jury what you intended to do that day?
Normally what we do is anytime we go camping, we'll when Barb's done getting ready, she'll put all her bathroom stuff in a little tote and either leave it in the bathroom on the counter or in the hallway. I'll take her to work. I'll get everything else tidied up, and either I'll take the camper down and pick her up from work and we'll go, or I'll go down and pick her up. She'll come put the last few things in the camper, and then we go. Is how we normally do it on a camping weekend.
And did you intend to call in within 2 hours of the commencement of your shift that day?
Yes, I've always called in if I was going to call in within 2 hours.
Let me ask you something about yours and Barb's finances in 2016. You recall being asked about that on the day before Barb's funeral?
Yes.
How much, what was your, on September 16, 2016, what was your annual salary from Crown?
$85,000.
And did Barb work full-time at the school?
It was considered part-time because it was only 9 months out of the year, and it was only 6 hours a day.
And if you annualized her salary at the school, approximately what would that have been in 2016?
$15,000.
Did you have a house payment?
Yes, we did.
Do you remember roughly what that house payment was?
$402. $402. Yes,
Did you have any car payments?
we did. We had one car payment.
And do you remember roughly what that was?
$248.
Other than the payment on your house and your car, did you have any other regular payments?
Just our bills, NSP and stuff.
And you were asked about bills that the police were finding as they were searching your home? Who in, as between you and Barb, took on the responsibility to pay bills as they came in?
Barb did.
Now, did the two of you sit down and talk about finances?
Yes.
How frequently did you do that?
Well, anytime there was like if I got a raise or a new bill come into the factor, we were on a budget every month. Every week, every month, we had a budget.
Did you budget yourselves?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
Barb took care of all the house finances as far as anything that occurred with the house. And anytime something new, like when we bought the car, we'd sit down with a budget, and we had mad money, we had grocery money, and we'd sit down and say, okay, if we want to take the extra money we're putting on the house, a little bit of that, and put on the car, and that's how we would do it.
When you say extra money you're putting on the house, what do you mean extra money?
We always paid ahead on everything.
So on September 16, 2016, were you paid ahead on your mortgage?
Yes, we were just over a year ahead.
And were you paid ahead on your automobile?
Yes, we were just over a year ahead.
There was some testimony, well, let me withdraw that. Do you know what it means to flip a house?
Yes.
What does it mean?
You go in and purchase a house, hopefully at a lower price, remodel it, do what you want to do, and then sell it to make money on it.
And did you ever do that?
Yes, we did.
I asked you if you did, and you said, yes, we did. Is this something you did with Barb?
Yes.
Tell the jury a little bit generally about what you and Barb did together with respect to these houses.
The first one we did was a complete foreclosure. We'd go together, we'd look at it, we determined if it was probable or not, the neighborhood and stuff. And then Barb was my tear this wall out, tear that wall out, we'll do this, we'll do that. And then we determined if we wanted to purchase it and how much we wanted to pay for it. And if it was something we could get, and we did, then we worked together on it, on demo and remodel. And she would always tidy everything up with like staging it and colors and like that.
How many times did you do this?
We did 6 houses.
And I believe I heard in the interview of you at the sheriff's office that one was a new home?
Yes, 2 of them were new homes.
And when you say new home, does this mean that you built them from the ground up?
Yes.
Each time that you did this, were you successful in making a profit?
We weren't out to get rich off it. It was more of a hobby to keep us together and do things together. And we would make a little bit of money off them, yes.
On September 16, 2016, how would you rate your credit?
Well, I had a $450,000 line of credit at one bank. And at the credit union, we could walk in and get, if we wanted to buy a new car or whatever we wanted, it wasn't a problem. We had no problem with anything.
On all those occasions that you were either remodeling or building a new home, did you have to go to the bank to get credit in order to remodel?
No, we just had to call and tell them what we were doing.
And would they give you the loan?
Yes.
Were you ever turned down for a loan?
No.
On September 16, 2016, did you ever perceive that you and Barb were in financial difficulty?
No.
I want to turn your attention to the lunchroom at Crown. How many folks were on your shift?
25 to 28.
And was that true for the whole time you were at Crown, that you'd have approximately that number of people on your shift?
Yes.
Do you get to know the people on your shift pretty well?
Yes.
How frequently do they have breaks at Crown?
Well, some of them are hour on, hour off.
And When breaks are taken, where do people take their breaks?
Either in the lunchroom or the locker room.
And at lunchtime, where do people take their lunch?
Some take it in the lunchroom, some, very few take it in the locker room.
Is there a lot of talk in the lunchroom?
It's all talk.
Do you recall a time in 2016 when you had a conversation with people in the lunchroom at Crown about a windshield?
Yes, I do.
What is it you remember about that?
Well, the windshield had been sitting in the garage at home, so I needed to get rid of it. So I went into
Let me stop you there. Why was it sitting in the garage at home?
I had ordered it for one of Jordan's friends, and something happened with the truck, and he couldn't afford the windshield in it. So I had it sitting in the garage.
And was it past the time that you could,
I could not return it, no.
and when you say it was sitting in the garage, how many garages did you have?
We have an attached garage, and then we have a detached garage.
And which garage was it sitting in?
It was in the attached garage,
And why was it there?
because the detached garage is kind of our place to, I was painting a skid steer at the time. And we paint and grind and weld over there.
And were you concerned about damaging the windshield if it was in the detached garage?
Yes,
Who claimed title to the attached garage?
Barb.
And why is that?
She always washed her car. We always waxed her car in there. That's where you came in when you went up to the house. You'd come through that garage, and we had the floor all epoxied, and it was always kept pretty nice, pretty clean.
Did the fact that that windshield was there for some time bother Barb?
It concerned her, yes, because she would have to move it. She always squeegeed the floor. We'd wash it and squeegee the floor. And when we do that, we'd do all the way out to the perimeters of the floor. And with the windshield sitting there, I had a little rug that it would sit on. And she would have to have me move it, or she would try to move it. So yes, it did concern her.
Did there come a time when she asked you to get rid of it?
Yes.
And when was that in relation to September 16 of 2016?
It was a while before. I mean, it was, she mentioned it that day or 2 days before or something, but it was a month or two before that she had mentioned it too.
When she mentioned things to you like that, did you always address what concerned her?
I tried to.
You said that she mentioned it 2 days before the 16th?
I can't say for sure what day it was.
But you thought she also mentioned it a couple months before.
Yes.
As a result of whatever she said a couple months before, did you have a conversation in the lunchroom at Crown?
Yes, I did.
And what was that about?
Well, Crown consists of mostly, there's a lot of people at Crown that drive trucks. I would say probably 40% of the employees drive trucks. And I went into Crown, the lunchroom, and mentioned that I had this windshield I wanted to get rid of. And that's how the conversation came up.
Who do you recall was present that day?
I know for sure Justin Heim, Scott Torgerson for sure. And there was a couple other people, but I don't recall who they were.
And what is it that today you can recall about that conversation?
That Justin Heim engaged that he had somebody or was going to put it in for somebody, and he made the comment that any monkey could put a windshield in with urethane. And after he left the lunchroom, Scott Torgerson had brought it up that he knew somebody, and he mentioned somebody.
Do you remember the name of the person he mentioned?
It was Jerry Logging.
And is that something you remembered on September 16, 2016?
No.
Did there come a time when you moved that windshield out of the attached garage?
Yes.
When was that?
It was shortly after the accident
And why'd you move it?
because there was so many people coming to the house, and we were kind of congregating and stuff in the garage, and I just moved it over there so it wouldn't get broke
When you say moved it over there, over where?
to that detached garage.
And on the day that the police executed the search warrants, where was that windshield?
I don't know. I don't remember. I moved it to the other garage, so it had to be in the detached garage.
Did you eventually get rid of it?
No.
I want to talk to you about the night before the accident on September 15th. Had you worked that day?
Yes, I did.
What time did you get off work?
6:30.
Did you have an exchange of text messages with your son-in-law, Michael Service?
Yes, I did.
What was that about?
Putting up a piece of sheetrock for him.
And why were you putting up a piece of sheetrock for them? What were they doing?
Well, we did a remodel on their kitchen and garage and added on to the living room area and the end of the kitchen and the garage.
Whose house was this on?
Michael and Jess.
Okay. When you say we did it, who's we?
Well, Michael and I and Barb and Jess.
And what do you remember texting him that on September 15th?
I don't remember what I texted him.
Do you remember what he texted you back?
Something to the effect that, don't worry about it, he would get it. It was about a piece of sheetrock.
Do you remember what you did that evening?
I went and put the piece of sheetrock up.
And after you put the piece of sheetrock up, what'd you do?
I don't remember. I went home.
When you came home at night, what was the usual routine with you and Barb in the evening after eating dinner?
If it was nice out, we'd go for a walk.
If it wasn't nice out, what would you do?
Watch TV, clean up and watch TV.
Anything unusual happen on the evening of the 15th that you can recall?
No.
Now, at that time, was your son Jordan attending school?
Yes, he was.
Where was he going to school?
UW Stevens Point.
And on that weekend of September 16, 17, 18, where was he?
He was home.
And when did he come home?
Thursday night.
So did he sleep in the house on Thursday night?
Yes.
And was he there in the morning on Friday morning?
Yes.
When you got up on September 16, what time did you get up?
Our usual time to get up was, I think, 6 o'clock.
Okay. What'd you do when you got up? What was your normal morning routine?
I would always get in the shower first while she was getting stuff ready. And it didn't take me long, so I'd be done. And then she would get in the shower. I would, like I say, start tinkering with breakfast for her. And then when she got done, she'd come out, eat a little breakfast, we'd talk a little bit, and then we'd get in the car and go.
And I know it's difficult sometimes to remember specific days, but on that morning, do you recall doing anything really out of the ordinary?
Just, we were messing with some stuff for the camper. Just getting some little things ready, putting the camper.
And Do you recall anything concerning a plumber on that day?
I had Les Abel coming to look at my mother-in-law's well.
What was wrong with your mother-in-law's well?
Well, the pump kept kicking on, and we thought something was wrong with the pressure switch or something with one of the lines coming in.
And who arranged for a plumber to come and look at it?
I had arranged for Les Abel to come and look at it.
And what time was he coming out that day?
He had a job in Maderi that he had to go to first, and when he was done with that, he was going to call me and come over and look at it. So we didn't have a set time.
Did you communicate with your mother-in-law that morning?
Yes, I called my mother-in-law that morning and told her that he was coming sometime today.
I want to talk to you for a minute about Barb's mom, your mother-in-law. Where'd she live? We lived up on the hayfield on the home. They have a little 30-acre hobby farm, and we had 2.8 acres. We built the house up on the hayfield just above where her mom lives. And then her brother lived just up the road a little bit on the same one of the parcels. So you and Barb's mom and Barb's brother all lived in the same vicinity?
Yes.
And how old is Barb's mom? And I apologize for being indelicate when I know she's in the courtroom.
Her mom would be 86.
Did you and Barb take on any responsibilities with respect to her mom?
Yes.
What were those responsibilities?
We would help with the lawn, help shovel snow, take her grocery shopping. Barb did all her bills. Anything that, if it was wintertime, her brother worked for the county, so he was gone a lot when it snowed. So we'd go on and shovel her walk and stuff.
And did Barb's brother Dave also take on responsibilities with respect to his mom?
Yes.
How frequently did you and Barb call her mom?
Every day.
And did you call or did Barb call?
I called that morning.
But usually who called?
Usually it would be Barb calling.
Were the number of times that you called Barb's mom infrequent, or were they frequent?
It was frequent.
So that morning, why did you call Barb's mom?
Because I had the well guy coming. And I wanted to tell her that I had him coming so she knew it was taken care of.
Was it your intention to drive Barb to work that morning?
Yes, it was.
Now, did Barb usually drive to work by herself?
Not if I was off for the day. A lot of times I would take her.
And on that day, did you choose to do something on the way to taking Barb to work?
Yes, we did.
And what did you decide to do?
We were going to take a quick jog over Highway M and see if we could find that blue Ford pickup.
You heard all the tapes of your interviews that were played in the courtroom, is that correct?
Yes.
And you recall on at least one of those tapes telling people that you were looking for Justin Himes' place.
Yes.
Do you recall saying that you were headed to Holman?
Yes.
Do you recall another time saying that you were looking for a place near Long Coulee?
Yes.
Do you recall another time saying that you were looking for someone near Shufflebine Hill?
Yes.
So let me ask you, right? Is Long Coulee the same as Shufflebine Hill?
No, it's not.
Is Holman the same as Long Coulee?
Yes.
Is Holman the same as Shufflebine Hill?
No.
And do you know where Justin Heim lives?
No, I do not.
Why'd you say Justin Heim, Long Coulee, Holman?
when I watch those tapes and I watch that video, that's not me. It's me in the picture, but it's not me talking. It's not right state of mind talking in that. I wasn't thinking of where I was going or what I was doing. I was thinking of Barb.
Where were you headed that day, or where did you think you were headed?
To the bottom of the or the Shufflebine Hill on the West Salem side.
How far is the bottom of Shufflebine Hill from the intersection of Highway M and Burgum Cooley?
I couldn't tell you. It's not, you mean in minutes or miles or?
Either one.
I would say it's maybe 8 to 10 minutes.
And if one were going northbound on Highway M, would one be going in the direction of Shufflebine Hill?
Yes.
What is that?
It's our Bubba mug.
We heard some testimony from one of Barb's coworkers about Barb having a preference for well water.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
So tell the jury how that would manifest itself with Barb.
Well, it was either Ice Mountain water or our well water. If you went out of town somewhere, we always had to buy a case or two of Ice Mountain water. When we went camping, we'd either take well water out of the fridge or we'd buy a gallon of Ice Mountain water. Common example, when we go to Black River area, we'd always stop at the Senex right there on C and Black River, and they never had Ice Mountain water. So she would maybe get a tea if she couldn't get Ice Mountain water. It had to be Ice Mountain or well water.
And when she drank the water, the well water, what would she drink it out of?
The Bubba mug.
Now, is that the only Bubba mug that you guys had?
No, it's not.
How many did you have?
We have 3 of these, and I have a camouflage one that was the first one we initially got.
And did you get the camouflage one for yourself?
Yes.
How long were you able to hold on to it?
Oh, the camouflage one is probably 5 or 6 years old.
Well, what I meant by my question was, how long did you have it before it was taken away from you?
Well, she took it to work every day. She used to take a little glass and the ice wouldn't stay in it. So then she started taking my camouflage Bubba mug.
And then after a while, did you get other ones?
Yes, it was a wrap that was on it, and from being washed and so old, the wrap was getting real faded. So we bought the silver and blue ones, or gray and blue ones.
Tell the jury about where she would take this with her.
Well, she took it to work every day. I would make if she was getting ready, I would make the water in there, put the ice in it for her, get it ready to go. If she went to work and forgot it, a lot of times she would call and see if I could pick it up for her and take it back to her. If we went on a ride, she would fill that mug and take it with us on a Saturday or a Sunday. She wouldn't take it out for dinner and stuff like that. But anytime we went for a ride or to work, she always had that mug.
And what would she do with it?
Sip on water.
When you say sip, did she wait until she was really thirsty and then sip?
No, she would just sip on it here and there. I don't think she ever finished it all.
Now, when you were riding in the Camry with her, was there a cup holder big enough for that?
No,
So where would she hold it usually?
she always had it on her lap.
Besides Barb's mom and her brother Dave, Who else lived near you?
It'd be Joyce's nephew,
And who's that?
Doug and Diane Adams.
And who else lived near
Well, you mean as far as neighbors?
you? Yes.
Tom Haroldson, Barb Thompson, Kevin Bradbury.
And I'd like to ask you about Barb Thompson for a minute.
Okay.
Where'd she live?
She lived just back to Cooley a little bit from us. We live on a Cooley Road, and she lived just back to Cooley Road a little bit.
And how far away is that?
Well, her land joined our land right on the road. It wasn't very far.
When you say you lived on a coulee road, these folks are from La Crosse and probably know, but just in case, what's a coulee road?
A Cooley Road is a little branch of a road that comes off one of the main roads. There was 5 houses on this Cooley Road. And it's just a dead end road is what it is.
Now, what was your relationship with your neighbor Barb Thompson?
Her husband got sick probably 10 years ago, and Jordan and I and several other people had hunted back there for years. And when her husband got sick, we started helping them with the lawn. They had a big lawn, and we helped them with the driveway, and just got to know them real well with that by helping them out and stuff. And when her husband did pass, she always took care of the lawn then, but we did the driveway for her every winter. And then when she'd go away, we'd watch her house for her.
And was she gone often?
Yes.
Do you know where she would go?
She'd go to Africa for a while, and then she had 3 kids that got married and had grandkids, so she'd bounce around from their houses.
On September 16, September 16 of 2016, had you engaged in discussions with Barb Thompson about the future of her property?
I don't know if it was September, but it was prior to that, yes.
Okay, tell the jury a little bit about what your discussions were with
Well,
Mrs. Thompson.
we, as far, repeat the question.
Well, did you talk to her about maybe buying the property?
Okay, so Barb Thompson had her property in a tree farm, and their main goal was her and her husband were going to retire off the tree farm. That was going to be their retirement. Her husband passed away, got sick with cancer and passed away. She was there alone. She tried keeping it up, but then when her kids one was in South Carolina, they were all split up. She had suggested selling the property, and the person that was initially going to buy it backed out. So Barb and I, my wife and I, were the next one on the list to purchase it. And our initial goal was, there was 87 acres there. We're going to fix the house up, remodel it, sell the house, and keep the 80 acres of land, is what our initial goal was.
And did she permit you to keep items that you owned on her property?
Yes.
You want to tell the jury what that arrangement was?
Well, she had a few things in the garage. She had 2 garages there, a big garage and a smaller, like a metal garage. She didn't have a lot of stuff left in the garages. She didn't have much stuff left in the house. And she made the arrangement that if we wanted to use the garage, because we had pull-behind mowers for the 4-wheeler and snow plows and all that stuff. So she made the arrangement that if we wanted to put stuff in the garages, in the big garage, we could and use it. But there was no lock on it. So we had quite a bit of stuff in the garage.
On September 16, 2016, was she at home or was she gone?
She was gone.
And for how long had she been gone?
I couldn't tell you.
Do you know how long she was going to still be away?
No.
When she was gone, would you often check on the property?
Yes.
And regardless of whether she was gone, did you occasionally check on the property that you kept at her place?
Yes.
Why would you check on it?
Because it's around the corner of a Cooley Road, and there was no lock on the door, on the garage doors, and we had quite a bit of stuff in the garage. of value.
So on the morning of September 16, 2016, did you have any intention to stop at her place?
We did stop there.
What time do you believe you and Barb left the house on September 16?
Quarter to 8.
Is that an approximation, or do you remember for
It's an
sure?
approximation.
1 second. Mr. Kendhammer, can you hand me that exhibit? I'll put it back. Thank you. Continue.
What'd you do after you set out?
We left the house. We stopped back there for a very brief time, and we started going down the road and talking and
When you say stop back there,
to Barb Thompson's.
and what'd you do at Barb Thompson's?
I got out and ran over, checked the garage.
Was everything okay?
Yes.
Then what'd you do?
Got back in the car. Ran over to the house.
What'd you do at the house?
Just made sure nothing was broke around the house. One winter she had a window blowout, and it froze all her pipes, so she had to have all new plumbing put in. So we just kind of just checked, make sure nothing's broke or nobody got in, because the house is locked.
The house or the shed in the house, what'd you do?
We got in the car and headed down the road.
And where were you headed?
We were headed over to Schuffelbein Hill.
And what route did you take?
We went down County C to Osmus Road to County M.
How fast were you driving? Well, I should ask, do you remember how fast you were driving?
No.
How fast do you usually drive on that road?
It depends where it is. I mean, there's some sharp curves on it and stuff, but normally I do 55, 58.
Have any reason to think you weren't driving as you normally would, driving down Highway M on that particular day?
Because of the rain and the overcast and the fog, probably not so fast.
And is that what you recall about the weather that day?
Yes.
Did there come a time when you were on Highway M that you saw something unusual?
Yes.
And what was it that you saw?
I don't remember what it was. I thought it was a bird. I thought it was a pipe.
Well, when you were present in the courtroom when all the interviews of you were played, is that correct?
Yes.
And do you recall when you were first asked what happened, you said a pipe came through the windshield?
Yes.
And was that true? Did a pipe come through the windshield?
Yes, it is.
Did you hear yourself also say at various points you thought you saw a bird?
Yes.
Okay, and I want to ask you about this. Did you in fact think at some point that you thought you saw a bird?
Yes, I did.
How is it that, well, does a bird roll off of a moving truck?
No.
How is it that you thought you saw a bird, but it became a pipe rolling off a moving truck?
Because I didn't think a pipe could fly.
And after it came through the windshield, did you know what it was?
I did not immediately.
When did you perceive what it was?
I don't know.
You recall hearing testimony last week about where police officers estimated you had said the pipe came through.
Yes.
When you spoke to the police officers and answered their questions about everything that happened that day, including where your car was when the pipe came through, were you trying to be honest with them?
Yes.
What were you feeling that day?
I was feeling very emotional. I was feeling that I needed to get to Barb.
If I asked you today to tell me exactly where you were when that pipe came through the windshield, would you be able to do that?
No,
Could you approximate?
I could approximate.
When you saw what you thought was a bird, what did you do?
I lunged forward.
When you say you lunged forward, can you show the jury what you did that day?
I can try to. I can't guarantee it.
When you lunged forward, were you even thinking about it?
No.
So, as best you can, what did you show the jury what you did? And by the way, were you belted into your seat?
No.
Was
I don't-
Barb belted into her seat?
I don't remember.
What was Barb's usual practice?
She always wore her seatbelt. I never wear mine, and we always talked about it because my son doesn't wear his because of me. And she always said I should start wearing mine so he would wear his.
But you never did.
No.
Show the jury.
It was, I had the hands on the wheel, and I lunged like this.
Do you know if you were fully seated when you did that, or whether you rose out of your seat?
I don't know.
Do you know what your right hand was doing?
I do not know.
Do you recall in the interviews that were played that at one point you said you lunged with both hands?
I do recall that.
Do you recall that at one point you said your right hand was on the steering wheel?
I do recall that.
Do you recall which it was?
I do not recall.
After you lunged, tell the jury what happened.
After I lunged, the pipe come through the windshield. Everything happened so fast. Barb started flailing and moving around. And I was to the coulee road, so I quick turned onto the coulee road. And I thought I put the car into park, but I apparently put it into reverse. And that's how I ended up in the ditch the way I did.
Do you know how long that took?
I do not.
Do you recall looking at Barb during that time that you were still driving?
Yes.
What do you recall seeing?
All I can recall is I had to reach out to push her back up. She kept trying to come over towards me.
And do you recall with which hand you reached out?
My right hand.
Do you recall anything else?
No.
Do you recall in the interviews you said she was flailing around?
Yes.
Do you recall that?
Yes.
How was she flailing around?
She was almost like she was limp. Like she had no control of her muscles.
When you got over to the side or the berm of the road on Bergham Coulee, did you intend to put the car in park?
Yes.
And I believe you said you put it in reverse instead?
Yes.
Do you recall the shift of the car going into reverse?
No, I do not.
Do you recall how quickly, if at all, you stopped it from going into reverse?
No, I do not.
What if anything, do you remember next?
I remember getting out of the car. I walked around the back of the car. I opened her door, and she was leaning forward, and the door wouldn't stay open.
You said the door wouldn't stay open. Were you between the door and Barb?
Yes,
And what was the door doing?
it wouldn't. It wanted to keep coming shut on me.
And what was your intent in being at the car door?
I wanted to get Barb out. She wasn't moving at the time.
Do you remember whether you were able to see whether she was breathing or not?
No, I do not. I don't remember.
So tell the jury what you recall you did.
I opened the door. The door kept wanting to shut. The pipe was hanging there. I don't know how many times I tried to jar the door open. I couldn't get the door to stay open. The pipe was in the way. I reached under. I had to get rid of the pipe, so I don't know if I threw the pipe or set it down. I don't know what I did with the pipe, but I got it out of the way. I tried to reach under Barb to lift her out of the car. And I couldn't. It was on the incline in the mud and the door. I couldn't get under her to get her out. Something was caught. So I jarred the door open. I don't know how it stayed open, but it finally stayed open. And I got a hold of her. I got a hold of Barb. And I tried to pull her out, and something was caught.
Do you remember how you got hold of her?
All I know is I got around her because I couldn't get her out. Something was caught on her in the car.
When you said I got around her, you folded your arms one over the other.
She wasn't a very big person.
So did you reach around her with both arms?
Yes.
And when you reached around her, do you recall whether you were front to front or back to front?
I don't recall.
So what'd you do next?
I tried to take her out. I think I tried to take her out nicely, but I couldn't get her out. Something caught. So I gave a tug. And when I did, we fell backwards. And she landed on me, and I rolled her off of me. And I started doing CPR on her.
And when you fell backwards, where were you located?
Well, I was, my feet were right at the foot of the front of the door, right in the bank, so I fell straight backwards from there.
So would your heads have been near the right rear wheel?
Yes,
You said you rolled her off and began to give CPR, correct?
yes.
When you fell backwards, was she on top of you?
Yes.
What kind of CPR did you begin to give her?
Chest compressions.
At some point, you called 911, is that correct?
Yes.
Why didn't you call them immediately?
I don't know.
Do you remember what you were thinking?
No.
Do you remember even having a thought process at that time?
No.
We heard the 911 calls. Do you recall there came a time when you said something to the effect of, wait, I have to do something with her?
Yes.
What did you do with her?
I moved her.
How did you move her?
When we come out of the car and fell, I rolled her off the side of me a little bit towards the car, and it was just a little bit of an incline in the berm in the ditch. And when I started doing CPR, she started bleeding more,
Where was she bleeding from?
out of her nose and mouth, and it started out of her ear. So that's apparently when I thought to call 911. And when I did, I realized that she was tipped down a little bit, and I needed to turn her. I thought maybe that's why she was starting to bleed more.
How did you turn her?
I don't recall.
In what direction did you turn her?
I turned her head towards the road.
In order to turn her head towards the road, did you have to move her body?
Yes,
Do you have any recollection of how you moved her body?
I do not.
At some point during that second 911 call, you scream at the 911 operator that the responder has gone past you.
Yes,
Could you see the responder?
no.
How did you know the responder had gone past?
I heard him go by.
And when you say you heard him go by, did he have a siren?
Yes,
You recall the testimony of Randy Erler,
yes,
who said that he drove past your car on Bergham Cooley Road that morning?
yes,
Did you see him go past your car?
no.
Until the first responder arrived, was anybody other than you and Barb near the automobile?
No.
And until the first responder arrived, did you remain with Barb?
Yes,
And did you remain in the ditch?
yes,
Did you take her head and bash it against the wheel rim?
no,
Did you take a pipe and beat her with it in any way?
no,
Did you take that Bubba mug and smash her in the face with it?
no,
Did you take any item, whether it was an object or your fist, and hit Barb?
no.
Have you ever hit Barb?
Never raised my voice to Barb. Never hit her either.
You were asked in the interview at the La Crosse County Sheriff's Office numerous times to explain the injuries that she had that day. Do you recall that?
Yes,
And do you recall that you were unable to do so?
yes,
You a physician,
no,
accident reconstructionist,
no,
you a biomechanic,
nope,
you a pathologist,
no,
do you know how she got all of the injuries on her body?
from the accident, from the accident that day.
From the scene of the accident, Your Honor, I have much more. Do you want to take a break now, or shall I?
It's a good time, we can take our noon recess now. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we'll take our noon recess until about 1 o'clock. Don't talk about the case. Enjoy your lunch. Mr. Kendhammer, you can step down. All right, the record can show that we're outside the presence of the jury at this point. We'll take approximately an hour recess. Anyone wants to put on record before we adjourn?
No, no objection.
Okay, be back in about an hour.